Council, can I call this to order?
Yes, please.
We good? I'm sorry, I've been in meetings since 2 o'clock. We've been running, so I've been over meeting with Mayor Craythorne in West Point on an issue, so apologize for being just a little late getting back. Council, I'd like to begin with the special session that we have here and then recess out a special session to cover the items of our work session, then come back into our special business meeting to adjourn from that one, if you're okay. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and wonder, Jordan, could I ask you to offer a thought or an invocation on this meeting? And Seth, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? So, Jordan, would you?
Sure. Our Father in heaven, we are truly grateful to be gathered together today as citizens of Syracuse. Please bless us that we can work together to come to those conclusions that will best serve the public and the residents therein. Please bless us that we can be wise in the things we do, that we can understand the consequences of any actions we take. Please bless us that we can be mindful of all those that might suffer from anything we decide to do. Please also bless us that we can know those things that will help us to preserve the future of the city. We ask a special blessing on the citizens of this city, that they can be watched over and protected, that we can create a community that is safe for those that live inside. And we are truly grateful for the blessings we have and for the opportunities we have. Grateful for this country, and please bless its leaders, that they too can know of thy will and be led and guided by thee. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Council, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for our special meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion by Corinne. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lisa. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Cassie, would you record that as unanimous? For the benefit of the public, we have one item that we need to transact, which needs to happen this evening. We don't generally take action on our work session nights, but we've got an item involving the surplusing of some property. And anytime that we surplus property or purchase property or spend money, we turn to the public for input. And so we're going to be holding a public hearing here in just a minute. The purpose of that hearing is to speak only to the surplusing of the property. There will be two other opportunities later on in the work session where we would love to hear from the public. So, Steve, would you come forward and bring us up to date on the surplus of property? Is that yours or, oh, that's Noah.
I can try.
Okay.
Steve would do a better job, but you're stuck with me. So, city owns 1.5 acres of land along Antelope, and the adjacent landowner, Sheldon Peck, has offered to purchase that, and the city's worked out an agreement with him to do a shared parking agreement. So once he develops that, he hopes to develop it into another office building soon. And so the office parking is during the daytime kind of thing, and a lot of park uses are an evening kind of thing. So it's a good relationship. We think that it's going to work out well. We have an appraisal. He is paying the equivalent appraised value. We are giving him some credit for the parking lot improvements that he'll be making and for the easements that he'll be granting for us. But the draft rep C's in the packet. Yeah, I don't know if you have any questions about it. Should be pretty straightforward.
I liked his addition that was made
lot of sense for if the park is ever sold, that he regains those easements and such. That I appreciate.
All right. I would now declare that we're in public hearing. If there's any member of the public that would like to ask questions regarding this, or have some input into this, we'd love to hear from you. So I ask you to just come forward and state your name. If you step to the end of the table down there and state your name and place of residence, we'd love to hear from anybody who has comment regarding the surplusing of this property. Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public hearing. Council, I'll turn this over to you. Councilwoman Bolduc, would you like to begin our discussion?
Get to jump the guns. I appreciate his addition. Everything else looks like it's fully in line, and I'm grateful that we can come to a happy cooperative agreement to win-win for us all. Get the parking lot that we desperately need and next to where we need it.
I agree with what's been said, and I like, we've discussed this before, it is a good compromise for the needs of two different entities. I think it'll be great for our citizens too.
Yeah, our original plan, or at least our thought was, we needed more parking for Founders, and so this could have become a parking lot. Under this scenario, not only do we get a parking lot, but we also get we get tenants in this building that will also provide property tax, or property tax and sales tax. And so I think this is actually a great compromise. It benefits him because they get to have more office space in the city, and we get more parking, and wow, I don't see a lot of win-win-wins.
Exactly.
Thank you, Jordan. David?
I'm not going to say it any better than Jordan just
Okay.
did.
Wow.
Wow, Jordan. That's good.
I'll try.
No, I agree with everything that's been said. New traffic that'll be in that area, I think this is a great potential win for the city. So.
Okay. All right. That said, council, I would now look for a motion to authorize the administration.
So moved.
I have a second.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Cassie, would you record that as unanimous? Now declare that we're in a recess from our business meeting, and we'll go to the agenda of our work session.
We actually just have a motion to adjourn.
You want to adjourn?
Yeah. I move we adjourn.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're in adjournment. Okay, I now call the meeting to order for our work session, and I stand corrected as point of order. Cassie, thank you very much. We're at item B, public comment. We would now invite you to address the council on any issue that you may like to discuss. It can be anything. It can be anything related to what we're discussing tonight. We would love to hear from you. If you would come forward, state your name and place of residence. We'll give you 3 minutes to address the council. At this point, however, there'll be no discussion. We would love to hear from you, but the council will not be discussing the items. We're here for a work session for them to discuss between themselves. So if anybody would like to address the council, if you'd come forward, stand at the head of the table, state your name and place of residence. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm Rachel Page. I live at 1950 South. I would just like to address the topic of mixed use, since it will be further discussed tonight. And I already corresponded this over email, but in case some of you haven't seen it yet, here are my thoughts. The proposals being put before the council are essentially just high-density housing being submitted under the guise of mixed use. So if those are the proposal types coming in, then why even have a separate zoning for mixed use when they could just submit these as high-density residential proposals? They are hardly any different at all at this point. Just don't even have a mixed-use zoning if this is what it is. Otherwise, require that mixed-use zoning look very different than just these high-density housing proposals. These proposals are just wolves in sheep's clothing, and developers will take advantage of this zoning all throughout the city. If the council does allow these types of developments to come in under mixed-use zoning, then I would ask that you review where the city has designated zoning possibilities for mixed use and remove that zoning option if there isn't already an existing option there for high-density housing. For example, the location east of Smith is not an appropriate area for high density according to the general plan, so we would ask that you also remove the mixed use option there as well. since they're essentially one and the same. I noticed in tonight's agenda notes that a suggestion was made stating that maybe the city required just a minimum of 1,200 square feet per 100 units. That's even less than what is already presented in the development, and the council seems to have a problem with how little is already presented, so obviously that is not solving the disproportionately small commercial aspect problem. The proposed development east of Smiths has 116 apartment units plus 4 small commercial units, which are the same size or smaller than the apartment units themselves, according to what the developer has shown us. So that makes the commercial component less than 3.5% of the units. After talking with each of you, we are under the impression that the idea for mixed use was to create a zone where it is unique and draws the community in with fun or interesting elements of commercial and can have elements of residential as well. However, an overwhelming portion of just high density housing is not unique, and with such small token commercial designations, it would have no draw for the community to patronize the commercial aspect. In fact, I would argue that the current proposals would actually deter members of the community from wanting to go to the proposed mixed use areas, and maybe even the surrounding existing commercial like McDonald's, because of the congestion from the high density housing. One of the city's goals in the general plan is to generate a higher daytime population, but the way to do that would be to have good substantial commercial interests that can employ residents locally and draw in both local and neighboring citizens to patronize the businesses. Mass apartment units simply create more commuting residents that wouldn't stay local in the daytime if we aren't providing adequate commercial places. We would ask that you not accept the current proposals as mixed use and either ask the developers to call it what it is and just submit their proposals under high density zoning designations, or that they actually create something unique for a different kind of zoning and mixed use.
Thank you, Rachel.
It all done.
Nice job.
I'm glad.
Take a breath.
I'm glad you're feeling better, thank you. Anyone else like to address the council? Yes.
Name's Jim King, I live in the Sunset Park Villas. So I just had maybe a footnote in your plan tonight. So the beginning statement says on February 11th, discussed the topic and instructed staff to define adjacent as within 85 feet and explore a minimum commercial ratio. But on page 7 of the write-up, it's crossed out adjacent and it says within 5 feet of the property line of. So I just want to make sure that that's noted, that you said 85 on the beginning page, but in your footnotes, it's only 5. So, and obviously we're against zoning there, mixed use, just don't think it fits with the ingress, egress problems there and the safety concerns that would be created by more high density traffic in that area. Thank you.
Sure.
My name is Judy Wimmer and I'm on the HOA board at the Sunset Park Villas. Today we have so many cars that are cutting through our community to go over to 1000 so they can go to Antelope to turn left because they can't turn left on Bluff. We have 8 community mailboxes in our community. 1/3 of our neighbors have to cross the road every day to pick up their mail. Many of our residents have canes or walkers. Some are very hard of hearing and some have very poor eyesight. We have already had one of our residents hit by a car, and it wasn't one of our other residents. With the increased traffic that this project will bring, it just seems inevitable that this will happen again. Many of our residents have expressed concern to us about their safety and security. We are very concerned also. We are a 55+ community that has paid above average price for our homes. We are very proud of our community and we work hard to make and keep it beautiful. People that have come into our community from other areas have expressed to us that it is one of the most beautiful communities they have seen. We want the value of our homes to stay high, the way they were when we purchased them. Please help us keep it this way. In the past, when a unit has become available, it has been sold before they could even get a for sale sign in the window. Today we have 5 units for sale. It just seems like it's getting out while the getting's good. It just seems ludicrous to me that you would add this much more traffic to the two busiest roads in the city. And I just want to ask you a question in closing. If your widowed, aging mother lived in our community, would you want her to worry every single day about her safety and security? Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Are there any others that would like to address the council? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close public hearing for this time. And we will reopen it again as the meeting progresses at the end, if something else stimulates your. We're at item number C, communities that care. Corinne, would you introduce that, Molly?
I'd be happy to. Okay, communities that care, otherwise known, or we're now renamed North Davis Communities That Care for this area. And it's a group of between city leaders and the Davis Behavioral Health. Am I getting that right? Okay. And anyone who possibly has an interest in helping the community with the schools or such, they come together to try to have prevention for our starting with their youth, so that we're not trying to backtrack on problems. So with that said, that was terrible. Let's have them come up and have their presentation. Yeah, Olivia? Go ahead.
Well, I don't really have to say anything. She said it already. Here. Thank you. All right. Hello, everybody. Body, Mr. Mayor, nice to see everybody. My name is Olivia Jaramillo. I am the chair for this program for Communities That Care for North Davis. I'm going to introduce very quickly the individuals that are with me right now. I have Mr. Andrew Sherman. He's a local business owner, and he lives here in Syracuse. Jessica Bigler is a prevention specialist with Davis Behavioral Health, and she is our Communities That Care program coordinator. And then Officer Heather Arnell, she is with Clearfield City Police. Now, Mr. Sherman is the vice chair, and Officer Arnell is our secretary. I did get that right. I always mix treasurer and secretary. And like I said, my name is Olivia Jaramillo. I am the chair. I'll tell you very briefly about myself. I was born and raised in Mexico. I immigrated when I was 14, and I did 20 years in the United States Air Force. Served tours to Iraq. I did missions in Africa. I've been a member of this community for over 15 years now, and I'm really, really happy to be a part of this community. Which brings me to Communities That Care. I have an 8-year-old little boy, and I'm very concerned about the environment that he's going to grow up in. As anybody who's a parent, we're all very much concerned with the safety, the behavior of our children. Now, Communities That Care, next slide, please.
I can make it do it. Maybe. Hang on. This is the first time I've done this,
Yeah.
I'll just do it that way.
Okay, that sounds good. So North Davis Communities That Care, we are a coalition made up of a variety of community members who are interested in supporting our kids, our local kids from the Syracuse and the Clearfield City High School cones. Now, this doesn't mean that we're just limited to organizations or nonprofit organizations. Any community member that wants to step up, be a community leader, and help us, they are more than welcome to join Communities That Care. These are just some of the organizations that we've teamed up with. Our goal is to prevent health and behavior problems before they develop using evidence-based process. So the way I will briefly explain this, it's instead of being the doctor that takes care of your cold or the flu, we want to make sure that you are washing your hands, or that you are using those what's it called, the wipes at Walmart. That's what we're being. We don't want you to get sick. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking with our children. We want to get to the root of causes, such as depression, vaping. It's not just taking away the vape from them, it's why is it that they got to that point. And there's currently over 30 CTCs all around Utah. Many of those are located in the Valley area in Salt Lake County. There's some in Weber County as well, and pretty soon we're going to have a South Davis Communities That Care, as well as the Layton communities that care. Now Layton gets its own because they are a fairly big city compared to the rest of them, so they're gonna have their own CTC coordinator. Next slide. Now, I'm gonna hand it over now to Mr. Sherman and he'll take it from there.
Okay. Is it every year? Every 2 years? Every 2 years, our 6th graders, 8th graders, 10th graders, and seniors take a SHARP survey where they basically measure their well-being in relationship to their own self-perceptions, their family relationships, community relationships, and their relationships within their school setting. And that provides a plethora of data. Within our scope, we're looking at both Clearfield High School and Syracuse High School, and all the feeding schools that go into those 2 high schools. So that covers 5 different cities. And so we've already made this presentation to Clearfield, so it's nice, your turn. And basically, not only did we look at the SHARP survey, but we've looked at other data that we've gathered. Chief Adkin was essential in that document data gathering. And the bottom line is we found a very, our most prevalent findings were issues with vaping and suicide ideation and depression, of course. So those were the 2 or 3 main things that we chose to focus on as the results of what we found in those SHARP surveys. Go to the next one. So,
Small.
what's that? Oh, it's fine. Oh, there you go. I don't expect you to read this, but we have these issues that we have found, and there's certain predictors or risk factors that highly correlate with the 3 issues that we found, and they're within groupings of community, family, school, and individual self-assessment. For example, lack of commitment to school is one that we found quite prevalent here in our area. I'll get to that in a second. So these are risk factors that we find, and they relate to the 3 issues that I just brought up. But they're predictors. Go to the next slide.
Give me a second.
Fine, faster.
Okay.
There you go. So we have these predictors of the problem, and there's 2 ways to solve them. We can decrease the risk factors that lead to those type of behaviors, and we can also increase the protective factors that try to prevent those behaviors in the first place. Does that make sense? So our goal is to decrease these risk factors. The 2 risk factors that we're working on is low commitment to school, meaning they just don't see why their coursework is relevant. I guess that's typical for any 16-year-old at this point in my life. But, and then the depressive factors that are heavy as well. And at the same time, we want to increase protective factors that go to prevent some of this, meaning specifically rewards for, there you go, pro-social involvement. And I'll get to that a little more in a second. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so within our community, our children view that they observe that they have a lot of opportunities. Our kids have a lot of opportunities, whether they're in elementary school, opportunities to do things within their family or within their junior high or high school years, opportunities to do things within the community or within their high school. And they feel generally very close to their parents. They feel like they can talk to their parents. If I go to the next slide. No, that's good. That's perfect. But what we're struggling with is rewarding for pro-social involvement. As an example, my 16-year-old has a hard time hanging up his wet towel after his shower. And so he hears from me when I see it on the floor, but he doesn't hear a thing from me when it's already hung up the way it should be, because that's how he should behave. And then so I don't say, good job, Spencer. Will you put this on I hope this is on the record. I like to So we struggle struggle with rewarding pro-social behavior because we just expect it. It's kind of an expectation. Wow, good job. You put your dishes in the dishwasher. You know, we just kind of expect that type of behavior. And so, and it's happening, it's quite prevalent within our schools. You know, the teachers expect you to turn in their homework. They don't stop and reward you because you just did. It's just an expectation. And sometimes we miss the boat on rewarding those positive behaviors. What's next? Oh, and then as an example of great pro-social involvement and rewarding for good behavior is slide. There it is we had Chloe, how do you pronounce her last name? Rulon. She found that there was a need for blankets in the back of police officers' vehicles for when children. I don't know. What you tell Mayor what happened? Just 2 seconds.
Well, she made, one of the things that police officers like when they're dealing with children is something for children to have in their hands, either
Right.
a teddy bear or,
Right.
and maybe, you know, Chief could speak to that more than me.
Right.
But something that a child can cling to, and so this little gal made these blankets for our police department, for little children, when they came in contact with children and there was a need for children to be involved with the police department.
Right, and so as a perfect example, Mary Gailey and the police department made a big deal about Chloe's work and effort, and not only brought her in, but also Mayor Gailey sent her a nice note as well. And so, I hope I don't. What's next? Is the chart right, Heather? Is that what your next slide is? Is the chart? So what we're doing is. What I haven't said is instead of focusing on vaping or suicide, we're looking at the issues that highly correlate, those risk factors that highly correlate with those issues, and working to address those. And then so we're bringing in
Reinforcement.
What's that?
It's just positive reinforcement.
On the protective factors, but then trying to avoid behaviors on their risk factors, right? And so, but we're working on proven programs that help those children and engage not only the children, but within their school, within their community, and within their families. Obviously, it's parenting has a lot to do with that as well. So so that's what we're working on. And then Officer Arnell has our last part.
Trying to wrap this up. So we appreciate Andrew and Olivia talking about that, but so I'm involved as part of the police department, and then we have all the other agencies that are assisting us. So we started with this is kind of the little wheel that helps us get started, get organized, develop a community profile, create a plan, and implement. We're at number 3 right now. And we're still gathering people to be invested in this and to educate the public about it. So now where we're going is we're just assessing what needs or what resources we already have that we can utilize. If we already have it, we don't need to recreate that, and we can use those supports to assist us. As Andrew said, it is evidence-based program, so that's pretty cool. So the data and the research is behind us, and it helps us be more successful. So we're going to look at everything that we already have, the resources available to address the low commitment to school, the depressive symptoms, rewards for pro-social involvement at school, and then we're in the next phase of creating a plan, and then we'll just kind of filter through to go throughout. Like I said, it's an evidence-based practice or program, so that's basically it. So, Olivia.
And thanks for your time, everyone.
Alright, so in conclusion, now everything that we've told you today, it's pretty important. There was perhaps a lot of information, but the biggest thing is that this program is not something that we're just gonna implement this year. It's not something that we're gonna be done with by June. It's not a planning committee either. We're not just here to put parties together. This is something that we're trying to do that is very scary in many areas of our lives, change. And what we're trying to change here is how our children grow up. We want to build a home, essentially, for them. What our plan and our goal will be for Communities That Care as well is we're actually going to start bringing other communities into this North Davis Communities That Care. We're planning to bring Sunset. We're trying to bring Clinton, or Clinton, however it says it. And we're also trying to bring West Point in. So what we're trying to do is build that community, build that home, which sometimes it can feel broken by so many diverse things. And we have all heard about the terrible things that have happened across the years. If we go some years back, we've heard of suicides in high school. We've heard of vaping going up. We've heard of so many things happening. And this is something that we're trying to change. And this change is not going to be something that we just do. We want this change to stick. And we need all of your help. And one of the biggest thing that we ask the City Council and Mr. Mayor is your support in this program. And if you have any questions, I'm glad to take them now.
Any questions, Council?
Well, I'd like you to tell me real quick, just a little bit about the July kickoff, the event that we have.
Yeah, you were reading my mind, because I was like, oh yes, we forgot to tell you. So we're actually, we're partnering up with other local community members, and we are going to be planning an event in West Point. And what is it called? Illumination? It's good. The title of it will be Illumination. We're basically going to have, it's a fair style. We will have booth vendors. We're going to have food, music, and the biggest point of it will be, can you just let us know, what is it? We're addressing depression and suicidal symptoms. Can you give us a little bit more, Jess?
You bet, yeah, so it's gonna, like she explained, it's gonna be an event that families can come to, youth can come to. Youth are gonna be heavily involved in helping to plan it. The ultimate goal is that it's part of our suicide prevention efforts and reducing depressive symptoms. How we're gonna do it is gonna look a whole lot different than that, though. I'm like, that doesn't necessarily draw the crowd all the time. So we're gonna bring the people in with a lot more fun, but my favorite part is that each booth that you stop at will give you something tangible, whether that's information or something to take home that you can implement today, you know, to be able to reduce those symptoms in your own home. So it's suicide prevention, but kind of getting at the real deal of what helps cause it in a fun way. The night will end with fireworks. It's just going to be kind of a fun event on July 23rd in West Point. Fun and informative, yep, at Schneider's Bluff Golf Course. It's free, and it's free. So if you're into party planning and you want to join us in planning the event, we'd love to have you.
And that's why I do like that we have other people present. It's the fullest I've ever seen in here, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah.
They all came for you.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I think that this is awesome. I think that in my professional world, I work in behavioral health, where I'm a little bit downstream from the effects of this, and what you're doing is so important for our communities and for our kids, because it is so much easier. It's not easy work, but it's so much easier to deal with it before it happens than to deal with the effects after. And so I commend you for that. And then on the evidence-based practices, again, I mean, you guys aren't having to spend a bunch of time and money developing a model. You're using what works and then matching that to fidelity. I think that's awesome. So great job.
Thanks.
Thank you, Olivia. Any other questions, Council?
I have one last question. So
Yes.
I know last year at we had an event where you guys were there at the grand opening of our splash pad.
Okay.
And that was awesome. And I was just wondering what the council would think about, you know, we open that splash pad every single year.
Oh.
Would we be interested in just make that kind of an annual thing where we just have kind of a family opening of the splash pad for the first time, and you know, invite the communities that care? I know they had a whole bunch of games set up. I think we did some slushies. I would just wanted to kind of gauge your interest on if we could continue doing that on a yearly basis. Just make the grand opening kind of a communities that care city joint venture, just to get people out to the splash pad, and hopefully there as a family to just kind of play together.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into the whole line of thinking of communities that care, because one of the biggest preventers is spending time together as a family and physically moving. And we've discussed the impact of recreation and learning something new and all of, and eating something good for you and all those things that actually impact your mind so well. So I think that's a perfect segue and maybe a great catalyst every year to get more families introduced to the splash pad and just spending time together in nature.
We have to probably pass it back.
Yes.
I didn't realize that slushies were so good for you,
Yeah.
so now I'm gonna feel a lot better
Oh,
about
yeah.
my indulgence.
Slushies are obviously good for you.
Non-slushies, we were just talking about for the kickoff event, we're gonna teach them how to eat better. And that's one of the things we've discussed.
Slushies are legit.
Can be, you can add bananas to them, there you go.
I just want my slushie.
I know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olivia.
Anything else?
Council, I'd like to just make a couple of comments before we move on in our agenda. I first became aware of Communities That Care a little over a year ago, I think. Mayor Shepherd in Clearfield and I were invited to a meeting to discuss this. I want you to know that I went in a little jaundiced. Because I came back and talked to Brody and thought it was a little too proprietary because I didn't understand. This is really, the sponsoring agency here is the Davis County Health Department, and then a handoff to Davis County Behavioral Health, who are helping us organize this. When I realized what it really was, then I came to Corinne and said, Corinne, you have an expertise in this area. You, because of your training, would you be willing to take this on? And at that time, she had about everything on her shoulders that she could have had on her shoulders. So, Corinne, thank you for being involved in that. And Lisa, you're there because you're a business owner. I appreciate you being involved in that. Welcome any of you to become part of it. It is a great thing. Yes.
I was going to say, I also want to thank Jess
Yes.
for her work. She's actually been doing classes at the schools to help teach mental health to them. And so I would love to see if there's something else we could do as a community to kind of get a night where Jess can do some of these same, Jessica, sorry.
Either way.
Can come and do some of those same types of seminars
Yes.
as on a more community-wide basis.
And this gives us an into that because of Communities That Care.
Yeah.
And I've been talking with Lisa about forming our youth council, our youth city council around Communities That Care, and giving them to understand, use the youth leadership that are to help us with these factors and so thank you, Jess, thank you, Heather, thank you, Andrew, thank you, and Olivia, you know I love you. Thank you. She is such an elect lady. Thank you so much. Council, if you would, I would like to, one of the reasons why we were a little late getting back is because Mayor Matthew Godfrey, the former mayor of Ogden, is coming to talk to us about better cities. And he's under some kind time constraint. I'd like to move us beyond item D and come down to E, and then we'll come back so that we have a little more room in our agenda for the Founders Park improvements. So, Brody, do you want to introduce Mayor Godfrey or Noah? Which one are you?
No.
Noah? Okay.
He's got some,
sure.
We're going looking at create
Absolutely.
And council, this has to do with our general plan, our general economic development plan. This is one of those steps that we're running through to get us onto a general economic development plan that we will hope to have in place by this summer.
Yes, we've been talking a lot about our economic development efforts as a city and how important they are for us, and having a balanced approach to taxes and jobs and all those important things. And like the mayor mentioned, we've there's 3 steps to the plan that we're talking about. First step was to study our income and our costs and revenues and things with Science Bank, and we have that modeling tool available that we've been toying around with. The next step was to work with EDCU shovel-ready communities, development-ready communities. We've been doing that, and then the third step is to hire a consultant to help us out. Mayor Godfrey is the former mayor of Ogden. started a consulting company called Better Cities. They're very well qualified. And he's gonna come today and kind of outline what their services will be and how they'll fit into the puzzle in formulating our economic development plan. And we have his presentation up, and I don't know any fun like limericks about, you know, I'm starting to get to know you a little bit, but he's a great guy. He's a runner.
I has been, yeah.
Oh.
I used to coach, yeah.
We're lucky to have him. He's a really smart guy. I've been getting to know him.
That just shows you don't know me very well. Thank you, I appreciate it. And you can call me Matthew, please. I did not run for a fourth term on purpose. I'm grateful to those of you who are willing to be elected officials. It's a tough gig. So we're very excited to be working with you. I was actually going to be here with Ryan England, and his brother-in-law passed away unexpectedly, and so he's to a family funeral tonight. So I'm doing this alone. So we're just going to go quickly over. I'm not even going to talk about the agenda because we're just going to do the agenda, and that way we can spend more time on these issues. So, you know, I'm going to talk about Ogden. We work all over the country. We've been in, not all over, we're in 12 different states. We do a lot in Utah, of course, but we're going to show just a sample of Ogden because it might be something that you know about, and it has some relevance, I think, to some of the things that we think might be over here in Syracuse. So we are different in that our firm is about half our time is doing studies, and the other half of our time is doing implementation. There are very few firms like ours in the country because normally you just write a report and then you hand it off to staff and you walk away, right, and wish them good luck. You produce a very different report when you're the one that's doing the implementation. And in most of our cities, we pick up the report that we've handed off, and they engage us afterwards to make it happen. And so we find that leads to very different outcomes because for two reasons. One is that the report has to be exciting enough, right? The vision has to be big enough that the community wants to engage us, and we've not even had discussions about that here, and I'm not meaning to plant that seed, but just as context. So we tend to do plans that are engaging and really visionary, and that they have to be realistic. It has to be something that can be accomplished given the market conditions. And so we have that lens as we put these reports together because that's just what we do. So just quickly, for those who aren't familiar with Ogden, so I grew up in the Ogden area, and I saw Ogden declining year after year the entire time I grew up. And I decided to run for mayor because all of my friends and families were leaving Ogden to get jobs or coming to Syracuse. And Layton and other places, they were not. My sister has lived in Syracuse and West Point. She swaps around. And so my brother-in-law lives out here. They were all leaving Ogden because there weren't opportunities there. It was a railroad-based economy. Even though the railroad had left a generation before, we kept trying to be the old railroad town, and that wasn't working economically. So our city, on the next slide, you can see, if you remember what downtown used to look like, it was vacant, where it wasn't blighted. There were transients, there was high crime, and there was disinvestment. From the time I was elected to the time I took office, the last tenants of the Ogden Mall announced that they were leaving, and so I was inheriting an empty mall to take office. People were leaving the downtown core, which is really the signature of your town. And so as we came into office, we had to reinvent the Ogden economy, and we decided that we were going to focus on the recreational assets, which really are incredible in Ogden, and tying those recreational amenities to the downtown. So this mountain to metro idea was born, and we were going to try to be this urban core with unparalleled access to outdoor recreation. So that was our way of positioning ourselves differently from the rest to create new economic opportunities for our city. So the next slide talks about downtown, shows downtown that we had to have significant reinvestment in our downtown core when the private sector didn't have any interest in investing in our downtown. We went and talked to all the major developers about building in Ogden and helping to reinvent the town, and they had no interest in doing that. And so we had to come up with creative ways to entice them in And again, that vision of why they would want to invest in our community, because market conditions were not lending themselves to that naturally. And then we had to build these outdoor recreational amenities. We did not have any money. You guys can appreciate this. There was zero budget for capital improvements. You can validate this with John Arrington. What we did at the end of our year, if there was any money left over from that wasn't spent, that was used for capital improvement projects for the city. And there was rarely any money left over. It was an embarrassment that there was just no money to fund these kinds of projects. And so once again, using grants, donations, and a lot of creativity with the private sector, we had to create assets that would create a new vision for the community. We also had to recruit jobs into town because again, we're seeing disinvestment and jobs leaving the community. And so fortunately BDO was a great asset as it was transitioning from a governmental use to a private opportunity. And so we spent a lot of time recruiting industry into our town, which was a great benefit and blessing to us because it created a new economic base that is very stable. Retail goes up and down, it rolls with the economy. And what we discovered after having this for a decade is that the industrial market was very stable, and it created a tax base that could be depended on year after year. We also recruited in, according to this theme, this economic theme that we developed for our community, which was around recreation. We didn't have a single outdoor recreation in town when we started, and after my time in office, we had more ski companies in Ogden than any other city in the world, to our knowledge, and we had a significant number of other outdoor companies that weren't necessarily ski related. And those helped to rebrand the community and make Ogden cool, where it was dangerous. And we heard things like the armpit of Utah. I don't know, I'm sure none of you uttered those phrases. We heard that often. And so having these cool companies like Solomon, Atomic, Rossignol, Scott, Nidecker, some of those come in, helped us get this next batch, which is below, Home Depot, Hershey's, Wayfair, Rockefeller, some national companies then were willing to pay attention to us and were able to recruit a lot of jobs into town. So the bottom line was, after a lot of years of work, we were able to get about $1.3 billion of investment from the private sector, recruit over 6,000 jobs into our community. We had 50 acres of downtown that was redeveloped when we left office, and there was 60 acres underway, which has continued to develop out. And we led the nation in job growth in 2011. So after that, we don't need to read through these, but a lot of people wrote nice things about Ogden, which was a delightful change because heretofore, if anybody was writing about Ogden on the national level or any other level, it was not positive. It was about the murder capital of Utah and the West. I mean, there were terrible things happening, and now we were getting public press, which has continued, I think, on to this day. So that was a little bit of background. It's really about reinventing the community and establishing a new vision for the next generation economically. And I think fundamentally that's really, as I read through what's asked of us in the RFP, that's what we're talking about. You guys do not have the problem that Ogden had, gratefully, but they are significant issues, because what we have to do is fight against the market forces. Right? The market isn't beating down the doors and saying, let us build you a Costco. And even though we all want that to happen, Nordstrom Rack is probably not going to be locating here to Syracuse on their own. So victories are going to be won by developing a strategy and reinventing the town and doing things that help change the market forces and entice them to make investments when they wouldn't otherwise. So how are we going to do that? Well, the things that have been discussed with us so far is talking about these 4 things, and let's just go in and do it. Antelope Island is a great asset, and there's it's wise. We wisely have been asked to look at what is the potential of Antelope Island. What can it do? Does it have the potential to change the dynamic of the town? Are there enough visitors that are coming or could come to Antelope Island to create retail opportunity or other opportunities within the community? We'll also examine kind of the existing opportunities within the community. What existing retail trade is occurring, what pent-up demand is there, what leakage exists, what spending is happening outside of Syracuse and other communities. We know it's happening, but how pervasive is it? And is that leakage in areas that we can recruit retailers to come here and capture market that they wouldn't be able to capture if they went elsewhere? So we're gonna scour the community and look for some of those hidden gems. The West Davis corridor presents a tremendous opportunity for you because there's a planned intersection, and so we need to understand what that can do for you and what we should be planning in conjunction with that to leverage the opportunity to the best potential. And then finally, direct jobs. Just a little, direct jobs are like manufacturing, and it can be intellectual value add kinds of jobs create tremendous value for a community. So there's a job multiplier that exists with a direct job, and anywhere from 7 to 15 jobs are created for every one direct job that you can recruit into your community. So it doesn't just provide employment and reduce commute times, but it also creates new job opportunities for others in the community. And so they involve exporting goods or services in exchange for money. It brings new money into the community instead of just recycling existing funds. This is what will support and drive additional retail demand. So we've been asked to look at what is the role and opportunity for direct jobs in Syracuse. Here's the project team. I'm in the middle because I am the weak link. I am the dumbest of the group by far, and I know that's a low bar to set for them, but they are incredibly bright and talented people that will be, everyone in that group will be working on this project here in Syracuse. One of them is a Harvard MBA graduate. I won't say which one because they all act like it. The economic development functionalities are really, that just means what are we actually going to do, right? We can't just talk and again have a report, but what outcomes need to exist in order for us to be successful here? We have to attract businesses and we have to retain existing businesses and help them expand. Sometimes that's the easiest way to grow jobs, is to look at what's already here that we can help develop. We need an entrepreneurial infrastructure. We need to look at where is the next generation of jobs going to be built from, and educationally, what kinds of buildings, what will be their work-life experience that they'll want to have, and how can we prepare for that and take advantage of those existing opportunities. And that leads to workforce development. We want to make sure that we're developing that workforce that will place the community in a good position. And then placemaking, this is more than just good planning. It's about having placemaking is just the idea of creating places that are special. So, City Creek is a great example of that. Station Park is a place that created a new retail experience that people gravitated to. It's about having a good design and creating an experience that people will travel to. And so that's an important part of your community. And I know you've done a lot. I read online about the things you've already done in anticipation of this, and we think that's an important piece of this economic development puzzle. Outdoor recreation is critical. That is an important component of a successful economy. And then sustainable economic development. So not just chasing the latest fad, but really trying to be forward-thinking and broad-based in the approach are some of the functionalities we're going to look for. So the scope of work that has been developed for this particular project is to do a retail analysis using geolocation data. That is cell phone GPS data. So what we do is we have access to over 200 million cell phones around the country. We can draw a circle around virtually any place and tell you who came in there, how long they stayed, where else they visited around that location. For example, so if we look at Walmart here in Syracuse, we could see what other stores do they visit besides Walmart that are inside of Syracuse and outside of Syracuse, grocery stores. I know it's a little creepy.
I was going to say, that's oddly disturbing.
I need to check my phone. Hold on.
Don't worry, we are tracking you as well. It's anonymized. It complies with all the privacy laws. We don't know the person, their name, or their home, but we can track consumer behaviors, and that's how we can tell you where there's leakage, when they're shopping outside of Syracuse, and who's coming here into Syracuse from outside of other communities. So it's a very cool big data tool that we're gonna bring and make happen here, so we can see, you know, what's happening with consumer behavior and what opportunities exist because of that. So that's gonna start 1st of March, and then the Economic Development Strategic Plan is the document that will hopefully be a living document. It's an implementation guide that tells us, based on all these things we've discussed, what the priorities are, who's going to do them, and how we're going to do them, how they're gonna be brought about. There are fiscal constraints, right? Some of these things have to be funded, and we're gonna identify not just who's in charge, but what would be the pathway forward to make these plans happen. And having met with the staff and spent time with them, there's a commitment. Sometimes, honestly, you go into cities and they're just trying to check this box to get on to the next item, right? They really don't have passion for it. But your staff here and the mayor are, and I'm sure you all, I've just not spent time with you yet, this is about making something happen. And so this document will reflect that and have the strategies and the assignments laid out in such a way that it can be implemented. So the next steps are to conduct stakeholder interviews. We're going to be asking all of you. This is a broad group. It's citizens, business owners, elected officials, just trying to understand what you think needs to happen, what works well in this town, and what's broken. And as we gather that information from you all who are the experts, we tend to always find patterns in that. Some are things that you already know, and some are not. There are things that bubble up out of that you kind of always thought of in the back of your head, but it was never articulated. And so those are the things that we'll work to find in the public process. So there'll be interviews, and then the phase 2 is the demographic. It's really the analytical side. Then we dig into data again to look at you know, what people want to have happen. It's one thing, you know, that again, we want to have a Nordstrom's here, but then we have to look at what can we do, what will the market allow us to do, and then we have to combine those two together in a way that creates a plan that's exciting and yet achievable. And then the next step is to do it. So the draft plan with the stewardship matrix just means who's going to do what, when, and have a final open house. And we usually in some of these final open houses people will give feedback to the plan, and the idea is that we are making changes all the way through. It has to be a living document that adapts to new ideas and to changes in market conditions. So we'll continue to have open houses and comment periods until we're ready to have a final draft plan. So that's the scope of work. Are there questions for me?
Good day.
I'm excited.
Yay.
So when you talk about being with us, seeing through the plan, I saw on the timeline, obviously, with the strategy and the plan that's developed is finalized in August. How do you see that playing out beyond August, and what role does your team have working with us ongoing after that?
Yeah, so you have a capable staff, so you guys may want to be able to pull it off on your own. A lot of times we find that the staff's already running as fast as they can, and there's just not bandwidth in the organization. So after the plan, if there are things that we feel like we have the capability to pull off, and you want us to, we just engage in a second contract to do the implementation. We have big specific items that are priority to you that we feel like we can accomplish, and then we work on making it happen. And that's the part. We love the planning side, that's fun, but it's more fun to see buildings coming out of the ground and have ribbon cuttings and those kinds of things. That's what we like to do.
Thank you.
Council, any
Yes.
other discussion?
No, we're in such an early phase right now. I don't have any questions, but I look forward to working with you.
What is our commitment level at this moment to this plan? I don't remember this being a separate dictated item.
Yeah, so, was it last
How did we cover this?
March?
We budgeted for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we approved it about a year ago.
So, if you recall, the mayor brought to the council.
No, I recall
the
there was
steps.
a general idea that we were gonna have this, but I didn't know that we'd gone to RFP and awarded a contract. What meeting did that take place in?
It's there. I just don't remember.
So we budgeted for and selected based on the ability for them to work with implementation partners. So.
We have a task force that's assigned to this group. We'll be working with them. Corinne and Jordan are gonna work with them and then bring stuff back to the council that they've had input on. The final draft of this will be something that this council all has input into.
Now, although it wasn't signed, the contract wasn't executed till recently, that was the proposal back in March. Was it March or maybe it's July or something, but, with Better Cities.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, Noah. Let's go back to D, discussion regarding Founders Park improvements. Brody, would you lead us off with this, and then is Chad here?
Chad is here. Okay. So for this agenda item, the important thing here is we're gonna look at the planned improvements at Founders Park. We are trying to nail down the exact proposal that we're gonna take out to bid. So there are some things that Chad's gonna walk us through. We've got Brian here, who's helped us put together both the design and the probable cost estimate. And so what we're looking to do is get some direction from you on a few items so we know what to go out to bid for. And then we'll go out to bid, and then we'll come back, once we see what the actual pricing will be, we'll come back to you for final approval and possibly amendments depending on what it is versus our budget.
Okay. So our first topic that we want to try to move forward on is kind of the west side of this project. And the west side of the project has funds that have already been allocated through either this fiscal year or next fiscal year 2021. So we at this point, the funds cover what has been proposed and what Brian has estimated from an engineer standpoint. And our question at this point is, it could potentially, what we've put in the replacement of the existing pavilion is what might happen to the east side of the park. So right now, that pavilion is very close to a 60 by 30. It's a little outside those dimensions, but the funds would cover either a 60 by 30 or two 30 by 30s on each side of the park. So we would like to see and hear your guys' opinion on what you guys think.
I like the idea that most of our parks we've used as a standard that we would have one 60 by 30 in the park so that a large group event could happen there. However, I also recognize that in certain places, deviating from that plan works better. For example, Jensen Park. Jensen Park is by nature not had the monster gathering that would use a 60 by 30, but has many, many smaller gatherings. And the 30 by 30s have probably been a better plan. So I'm conceding that. Now, based on that, and based on Founders, as it is more central to the city and probably less of a neighborhood park, is your suggestion that 30 by 30s would be a better solution? Because I'm kind of leaning that way, but I want your opinion.
Yeah, if history speaks and we see the consistency through other parks, we feel a 30 by 30 really will fit a need for a reservation or some kind of a gathering for the most part on a consistent basis. There are times that, you know, they need a larger facility, but we do have that one just across the street at Centennial Park.
And that's what I'm thinking.
You know, and so you know, we feel as a group that, you know, a 30 by 30, especially if there's one on each side of the property, really will fulfill what we're after, and I think we'll have a better return of investment with it as well.
So I'm gonna say, just as kind of a conclusion, I still like our satellite neighborhood parks having one big venue, because there are pretty consistently some large neighborhood gatherings, even if it's not every month, but a few times a year, and that's a really big part of community. However, this is very close to where we already have very big pavilions, so I am gonna be 100% in agreement that 30 by 30s are probably a better use of our funds.
Can I mention one thing to you, council, too, is the property line between the school district and us, that existing Bowery stretches that boundary.
Yeah.
And if we brought something back onto our boundary, onto our property, I think we'd
Yeah.
want.
Yes, I agreed.
Well, even just looking at the size of this room, I'm guessing we're about 30 feet by probably 40. I mean, I'm just trying to kind
Dave,
of
you've
gauge
measured it.
I
Go.
have, this
I'm
is 20
trying-
by 40.
Okay, 20 by 40?
Yeah.
Pretty close, pretty close.
So it's
Pretty
actually
close.
longer this way.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think,
but
it
it's-
seems.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a good sized gathering space to me, so I'm just trying to think of in terms of when I bring my family, or if I'm with extended family, or if we have a large group for a political gathering or something, it tends to be that this is plenty big, so
Yeah,
that's a good size.
I think, you know, when we looked at if we looked at the park survey results, a lot of comments about gathering space, a lot of individual family type events. And we were talking earlier, you know, you don't split groups very easily. People don't share spaces, and so having it in schools different makes a lot more sense to me too.
Same thing's true if you buy a couch, 2 people are gonna sit on it, just like if you're buying a love seat, so, anyway.
I'm not sure that correlates.
But
But I'm going with it, I'm going with
They
it.
tend to divide, and it's hard to do, so
Okay.
anyway, yeah. You need to be inside my mind to figure that out. It's all good.
Anyway, moving on. So, going on, help me understand why we can't center this. I've been told it's Sewer Fall.
Center what?
Like split the distance.
I would like to get the
restroom.
bathrooms in
The
the
location
center
is where
more
it's set.
centralized in the park,
Oh.
because this is on the very edge of the property, and it's the furthest point from any other point in the park.
It's stepping, I mean.
Yeah, so I looked at moving that restroom basically to the
And-
other side of that sidewalk right there.
Mhm.
And we'll be like 2 feet out of the ground with sewer if we run it
Yeah,
at the pitch
yeah.
at
Yeah, 'cause
sewer
we're falling
code.
the stairs.
We're 100% gravity system, so we can't pop the building up out of the ground.
You absolutely can.
So,
Put it on a slight hill.
can.
So that means that anybody who has trouble with
Move on
hills is
to
gonna have
other.
trouble getting to the bathroom.
Well, and we need more.
That guy behind you with the cane's gonna hit you.
I guess my thing is, this has always been kind of inconvenient, and if we have a chance now to fix something. And
Having
if,
the second one on the other side though. So.
but now I'm putting in 2 restrooms, one could have worked.
I'm gonna say 2 is better than 1
Well,
because the
that's
position.
always the case, but.
Well, that's the same feedback we have from citizens as well. Please
Yeah.
give us more
More
restrooms.
restrooms
Right.
and more
Consistently.
locations. That and the fact that I think you have to keep in mind, and this is something that was new when I was researching a few public events nearby. They said, look, sometimes you have to really be smart and put your bathrooms on the outside of your park, not in the middle of your park, because there are certain things associated with it, like smells.
This is actually a good segue into the next item, the second restroom, because there's some funding issues with that.
Council, I'm going to extend the discussion here till 7:30, so just give us a little more.
Okay, yeah, so the next 2 discussion points, you know, are in regards to the east side of the project. And we are looking at, in our 5-year parks improvement plan, we have it allocated that in FY 2024, we'll have funding for, or at least have the availability to fund a restroom on the very north of that parcel. Again, that's very related to the fall of sewer. It has to be close to that location. And as well as, again, if we do another 30 by 30 pavilion, then we could have some cost savings if we do a dual structure with the shade and the restroom itself. So, you know, trying to coordinate and orientate that with that development over there.
Yeah, the only objection I have to that, and this is not a strong objection, but line of sight is much preferred when it's near your pavilion. Because if you can hide kind of in the pavilion behind a restroom, that makes it a little tougher to manage. If you've got kids there with you, if you're, you have people at the courts and you have some kids in the playground, but you can't see them because they're behind the bathrooms, or that makes people a little leery. Or also, that's on the other side of the skate park, and we sometimes have some people hang out there who are.
Well, except for that this is about the best of that whole lot. You wouldn't want it, in the parking lot.
Is that an objection to the bathroom or the
That's what I'm
location?
saying, like, location.
Well, I mean, if
Where
the
else?
bathroom was a little more in a corner, not right between. Look, I think this was the better option.
Okay.
I do. I'm not, because we're gonna save money. I am agreeing with that. But in the case if we had it, if it was all sixes money-wise, I'd maybe move it towards the end of the property, because then you're not trying to look through it to see the rest of the property. But that's just what I'm thinking. But, if it saves a significant amount of money, I'm okay with where it is, but.
But I'm gonna say, this is gonna go off of your previous comment, if we're making the argument of smells, do you really want it attached to your Bowery?
No, I agree with that. That's
Like
why
some
we
of the-
But
used to take.
I would argue that a bathroom that is, a flush toilet.
I was gonna say, I don't think we have an issue, because I've been
I know.
plenty bathrooms over my time.
Have you?
Good
experience.
And I think we can all agree, if we've been to Bear Lake, we wanna stay far away from those non-flushing toilets.
Yeah, but I don't think these are
If
the
you're talking about flushing, I've never had an issue with
Right.
that.
I don't think these are an issue.
And not only that, when we have it over the splash pad and it's right down.
No,
So
that is a better quality though
I-
than we've had in Founders in the past. The fixtures in Founders lend themselves more to.
Oh, sure, they're ancient.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm rejecting your previous argument that you're concerned about smell.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say with these particular two discussion points, I think the placement of these isn't really key right now. It's more, we have to kinda maybe reprioritize
Money,
funds.
right.
Well, I think
This is
think of-
initially
we
a
know we've saved
2024.
money.
Yeah.
We know we've saved.
Yeah,
money by
going
doing
from
it.
2024 maybe to sooner.
Economies of scale make perfect
Right,
sense.
and
For
so,
sure, especially-
and so.
But at the
we-
And if we're gonna make the other improvements at this park, we'll want to make the restrooms
Right.
closer.
And you need to stop it all at the same time.
Yeah.
So you have to have, I think we do need to figure out where it's going as soon as possible, because we know we have a lot of moving parts going on in this same park that we wanna try and get those efficiencies to get them all done at the same time and not drag this on forever.
From a design standpoint, when we were looking through this, I think all or most of us felt that the pavilion would actually be better suited on the south side of the pickleball courts by the playground.
I agree.
I agree.
The reason they're together here is because you can get the combined
Economies.
The economy of scale for the-
pavilion restroom
because of the
combo
restroom.
unit.
Mhm.
So it's, you might save a little bit on the unit, but the location, certainly if you've got kids, and that corner with vehicular traffic is a little concerning, I think. We had some safety concerns with
Yeah.
So why
people
can't we
coming
move the
around
whole
the
thing
corner.
on the south side?
I think we're talking about sewer fall
Fall, yeah,
issues there.
with the restroom.
And how much
For
savings
crying
are we
out
talking
loud.
about?
Dang sewer.
How much savings are we talking about matching them up?
What are our numbers?
Do you
then?
remember the actual cost difference between the combo unit and
It's,
the separate?
I mean,
Was it
really-
70,000 for the bathroom by itself?
Well,
and
this
for the restroom?
second restroom is much smaller.
It's like
facility.
ancillary.
So it's, I mean, the restaurant itself is a significant.
Are we gonna do the prefab ones like we've done in some of the other parks?
That's the best
They
bang for a
say,
buck.
yeah, it is the best bang for a buck.
Yeah, and at least we
So-
get it.
And
But
they've
I
filled
don't
up
think you
well.
can you do those in conjunction with an awning?
Yes, and that's
Oh, they
that's
sell
where
a combo.
Exactly, and that's where
Oh.
we're seeing this cost savings
Okay.
potential, and we haven't, the individual we've been working with is trying to get some numbers together for the shade structure end of it, so we haven't seen the exact, but, I would say, you know, anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 in savings by the time you're putting the structures together, as well as
Yeah,
the
that's-
concrete space and skirts that are needed for it, the individual space. If we want, electricity ran to that pavilion for lights, that's gonna add to the cost.
In its perspective, that's enough to put all the tables in both pavilions. So, I mean, that's a big, yeah, it's a big deal.
So it's.
Can we discuss pickleball?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Questions I have, just in visiting other pickleball courts, now I have not actually played pickleball, but I have
Yeah.
visited, and my
Not for
husband.
lack of invitations.
Yeah, whatever, anyway, I'm figuring it out, I have other goals right now for a minute. So, there's, I've never seen them have a 10-foot fence around them, is there a reason why we estimated that? I mean, that's a really tall fence for a ball that doesn't go very
Right,
far.
I think kind of where we were going at from there is, and, you know, with our discussions last week, you know, relative to tennis courts, I know that it's
Totally different.
you know, you're having a lot more spring with tennis rackets.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think with the placement of this, we were a little afraid of pickleballs getting over to the neighbor's house,
Can we just
not
put
on
them
our
on one side?
property. So I mean, you could do just one side.
Yeah.
I just know like beginner pickleballers, you know, I mean, I've played with them, and the tendency of the ball leaving the courts is higher. But
Confessions of a
Let's just do
beginning
one side
pickleball
then,
player.
is that okay, or something?
so I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah.
not, I don't think anything that we're dead set on, it's just,
Alright.
you know, go from there and we can work down.
Okay, and then just another question, why did you get the bid for gravel around this rock mulch? Because I think that tends to travel onto
Oh,
courts.
absolutely,
And
you
that's
know,
a
loose
problem.
material, right?
Yeah.
And you know, talking with the group, last week as well, one of the individuals stated that he didn't necessarily want any kind of irrigation water on the court, so skirting it with, you know, some.
You didn't have to be water.
Yeah, material dry skate that we could just drip irrigate, we don't have to worry about that aspect, but we can design it and we could figure it out to have irrigation heads, it's more of a spray zone, so you're not losing water like you would a big sprinkler head would.
Okay.
So I don't think that was necessarily set, it was just talking with them, he in particular was the one that mentioned that having a good buffer between that and the actual grass for grass clippings as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's why we went in that direction. Ryan, you want?
Yeah, it gets a little tight too, it's only like 8 feet between those fences too, so that would all have to be hand mowed if we put, grass in there.
Push mower.
And I know that it shows, the gates, but apparently that's, like, the one that we visited last summer, or maybe it was a while
Two summers
back,
ago,
was it
yeah,
2
I
summers?
remember.
Golly, Ned. Okay, they didn't have gates anywhere, it was just open slots.
Yeah.
So, is that a possibility too, so that, you know, cause they end up dragging if there's any settling and such?
Kids riding on them.
Well, there's been a
True.
new information that has come from the women associated with the pickleballs, and they have mentioned several of the things you've just brought up that they actually don't want in the bid. So, like the gates and things like that, so I don't know if that's something that needs to be, I mean, I know we all received an update today on that. I don't know if that's something we'll be discussing now, but
Do you wanna
anyway,
lead
it
us
was
in that?
it was in that.
Yeah, well, we do need to talk about money.
Okay.
So, yeah, if you wanna go through, some of those discussion points also had a financial component.
Right, so 2 and 3 with the second restroom, to proceed, we obviously would need to, receive the funding for that, which would be first option, impact fees. Or second option is we would reprioritize existing projects in the plan and try to find some room there. Looking at the existing plan, you know, with next year, we do have one bigger project, Legacy Playground. That's already a couple years past due.
Higher priority than
It's, you know,
this
it's
playground.
it's in
Right.
this repair, so that's really the, as far as immediate
I
next
wouldn't,
FY
it
year,
doesn't make sense to
it'd
switch
be tough.
a
So,
liability
I agree.
over.
So you want it,
So there, yeah, you don't have a current budget for the second restroom.
Okay.
so are you
Unless you
looking-
use impact fee money.
Okay,
Impact fee money takes away from
Other.
like
Yeah.
the regional park or any other impact fee project that we're looking at, so those are,
Dedicated parks.
those are like the prioritization decisions, we're looking
Right.
at.
so what if we were to do all of the all of the stubbing, all of the things that would bring it to the point of being ready to just set that restroom right on top of it? How much money
And
are we
when would
talking
we
about
estimate
there for
out?
prep?
If we're gonna talk about that, I mean, I see the point, but we talked about that in Rock Creek. And we did have some problems where they had stubbed that and then it was damaged between the time that the work was done
It was
and
quite a
they-
few years
yeah.
between though.
It was 2 years and that, but it was a
Was it just
problem.
2?
Yeah, it was just 2.
Cause I thought it was done when they first put in the park, is when they stubbed
Yeah,
it, as far as I
initial
understand.
stubbing,
Yes.
Yeah.
When they first put in Rock Creek altogether, that's when it was stubbed, so it
Well, I
was
wasn't
10
even
years
here then,
plus.
so I
I'm
don't-
just saying, that's
I
when it
don't
was.
remember, I remember when we were here talking about Rock Creek renovations.
Right.
They talked about re-stubbing and Cresta brought up the fact that when that gets damaged, it's just a waste of money.
Sure.
So I think that these drop restrooms, these prefabs are actually
They've done well.
reasonable enough that maybe we could look into impact fees and get it done. It just, I don't wanna do anything that has to be redone. That's a waste of money.
And priority shift and
Yeah.
stuff it in
And then it could
comes
be
10
2 or 3
and-
years,
yeah.
because, well, the reason that we didn't do Rock Creek immediately was because then we realized we had to redo the fields. We thought, well, if the field isn't there, there's no need for the restroom. I mean,
There's
things
always gonna be
happen.
yeah.
So, I think that we need, if we're gonna do the stubbing, we need to find a way to drop that in. Now, does probably mean we're gonna have to go over some impact fee juggling or something, but,
Well, if we do the stubbing and then you just continue your 5-year plan, you would have the bathroom in 2024. Which is basically a 3-year.
Yep, 3 years,
Yeah,
so
I
we're
don't
technically
like that.
going into 21 as we speak.
plus, we're also dependent on Founders right now as our premium event for when the whole city gathers, so
Mm.
I would find a way to move that up.
And to Jordan's point earlier, if we have an opportunity to do it right,
Let's
the first
get it
time.
done.
What do you think about delaying the playground though, for other
Yeah,
parents?
priority makes sense.
Yeah,
Liability's
that
sake.
might have to, yeah.
So the existing playground at Founders Park, yes, it is designated more towards 2 to 5-year-olds as well.
Right, it is for small
And it's not in
kids.
a condition where it's unsafe, you know, it's
Right.
as
It's just
for safety
outdated.
and space. Yeah, it's
Is
just.
this Legacies or Founders?
So this one we're talking about is
Founders.
Founders.
Founders, okay.
Just some of the-
Founders.
Legacy is a liability.
Legacy
potentially,
is.
right?
Is
to that
now in
point.
an unsafe.
That's where we have the liability.
We were originally going to
For risk management.
replace the Founders parking lot.
Right.
But once all the updated budget numbers came in, there's not enough to
Right.
do it. However, as Chad indicated, we could reprioritize with that. I think in 2022, we're gonna do Fremont.
Next year.
So wait, can you say that again? So we were originally going to replace,
The Founders Playground.
oh, playground, I thought you said parking lot.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I may have, playground.
You did say parking.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm like, I thought we
You're
were.
very-
It's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Founders Playground. In fiscal year 2022, we're budgeted to replace the Fremont Playground.
Okay.
So we could switch those two and get the playground still done in 2022, which is the next fiscal year,
I
which isn't, that's
think
not bad.
Fremont still has some life to it, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then plus, we're not sure what all needs to happen there
We
with
do,
the
well,
highway yet.
I think we still need that playground, cause
Yeah,
we'll still own
we'll
that
still own
park,
that part.
but
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Legacy would get done this next year, in the meantime, cause it's in really bad shape,
Right.
it
Yeah.
has to get done.
It, that one's a safety issue.
I'm okay swapping out the Founder's Park.
Yeah, and doing legacy.
I think it'll realign the corridor extension
I
as
agree.
well as our
Yeah.
improvements
Yeah.
here.
So we won't have cash to do it all with this project, but it would be done in fiscal year 2022, which isn't that far away.
Yeah, right. Next
great.
summer.
A little over a year.
Want to go on pickleball?
Before we move on, let me just see now ahead, you all seem to be.
On moving Fremont and
Reprioritize.
Founders, yes,
Yeah, and
I'm agreeing with
figuring
you.
out a way to do the bathroom if possible.
Okay.
But we do, I think we do have to find a way to get that bathroom in, cause if
Right,
we're gonna
yeah.
upgrade facilities, you gotta have a place for people to take care of that.
So,
So I think with that and
Yeah.
also the cost savings we'll save with a 30x30 on the west side.
Yeah.
Should give us funding to
For the
help out with the
bathroom.
shade structure
Oh.
and restroom,
Combo.
some savings there.
But to
Perfect.
Dave's point, it's
That's
cheaper to
worth
do
it.
it once than twice.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's totally worth it.
Okay, let's move to pickleball. You wanna lead us in there?
you wanna leave us in there? So in the, with the pickleball courts, we got the probable cost estimates, from Brian. There's a couple options here, there's a six pickleball courts. That price tag came at 285,000 and change, all things considered. And then, that's higher than what we had estimated prior, the dollar figure we've been talking about is 180. So he looked at what, 4 pickleball courts would be, and that goes down to 210, which is.
It's still more than 180.
It's more than 180, it's a little closer to striking distance. There have been we had a meeting with, the fundraising committee, for the pickleball courts, and, we did discuss things that, if we needed to, we could trim out. And some things that could possibly be done in kind through volunteer, work, including some of the demolition of the existing concrete,
So-
It's really
landscaping,
a blessing.
stuff like that.
We probably need to look also at what it costs for 3. Instead of trimming 2 off the
3
end,
courts?
just divide it in half and do a strip of 3. I'd like to know where that falls, if it falls within range or not. Because we do have a budget.
Council, I'm gonna give us 15 more minutes bidding the budgets, let's go to 7:45.
So, I mean,
so
I'd
what's
throw
the-
out 50,000 would come off based on price per
in which
court.
case we would then fall within budget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to consider, there's a budget. My only concern with the suggested trimmings is that there's some legalities there. Number one would be that, we have to have an open bid process. Anytime that you agree to something with a particular contractor, you have to make sure that that extends to no further obligations. Like, you can't say, well, this guy will give you $5,000 off if you give him this other portion of the bid, which we don't know what that is, because that's illegal, right, Paul? I mean, we can't just like conditionally say that this guy has to get it so that he can give us.
We're not suggesting that, just so you know.
And I'm not following, I don't understand the transaction you're proposing either.
Yeah.
Okay, so
This is just talking about planning it.
the point would be that there's some legalities of the RFP process. If somebody says they're gonna give something in kind and it's 100%, then they have to honor that throughout the bid process, and that's fine, but it can't be conditional. It can't be, you know, only if I get this % of the job will I give this % back, because that would be an illegal practice.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I mean, we just did a real estate deal where they said we will give this I mean, we got some savings out of that.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm not sure where
It's a
you're
real
going.
estate deal, like an RFP.
Yeah, as an RFP, they say
A real estate deal, you're contracting with this one person you already know. If you're doing an RFP, you're giving everyone the chance to bid on this.
Yeah, we need to follow the purchasing policies
Well,
that
naturally.
exist, so, yeah, if people will put in their bids, and we analyze the bids as they come in, so, yeah, we wouldn't accept any
I just
sort
wanna
of
make sure we're
inducements
not
to.
outside of those practices.
So, yeah, we're gonna follow our procedure.
Yeah, that would be part of the bid
State
process,
law.
regular
So along
procurement.
those lines, let's say that they have somebody who says, I can do that bid, I will give you half off. So they would be required to give us a bid, and it would show with that half off, and then because
Yeah,
of
that's
the
fine.
deal, then they would most likely get.
They would most likely
The
win.
bid would be
Okay.
more.
Right.
More
But
attractive.
we can't say
Decide
to a
on that,
general
so
contractor, you have to use X contractor for gravel, cause he's giving us half off, if his half off price is more than somebody who's bidding full price. So there's no conditions that way, you can't
Well, just
predetermine
the
that.
bids will show out.
Yeah, it has to be all legal.
Right, and so, you know, I think some of the things that we looked at possibly, if we had to trim, first of all, we can start there, like, you
Yeah.
know, what can we do with that? You mentioned the gates,
Mhm.
you know, those can go, the benches can go, the shade structures can go, if you want. Now, those are not decisions you have to make right now, though, we can do that after we go out to bid, so,
Okay.
you know, we can see what
where
the,
it falls.
see what the actual
Can
pricing
we,
is.
and we indicate to them to have line item?
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's the way to do it. If there's line items that we can disregard that are optional,
Right.
that makes it easy to find a quote that's within
Absolutely.
the bid.
That's
What
exactly
I think you'd wanna focus on prior to going out to bid are, what's the specific work that
Right.
the fundraising committee can get commitments from prior to going out to bid?
Well, and
Cause when
Is
we
that
go
what
out,
we've got here
when we go out
before
to,
us?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry,
No,
I
no.
just was wondering, is that what this is?
No,
Sorry.
Yeah, some of them
or,
are.
I'm not sure what you're looking at there.
Oh, it's in the packet.
You have to guess, Brody. I'm so sorry. I just received this today, and it's kind of line items,
Yeah.
several things that have been
Dropbox.
removed,
So I would say, those are the things you wanna have nailed down prior to going out to bid, so all the bidders are bidding
On the same thing.
and they know what
Right.
they're bidding on. So if they're gonna have in-kind work done to remove the concrete, for example, we
Right.
wanna know that prior to going out to bid, so.
But you have to get
so
a
that's
commitment that
committed.
that is 100% in kind and not,
Well, that
Conditional.
becomes
Conditional,
part of the
yeah.
bid, and if it's in the bid, then they have to honor that.
Yeah, and to the extent,
well,
to the extent that we want, we would actually prefer that it's outside of the contract.
Yeah, yeah.
So that the contractor doesn't have to worry about coordinating time
Right.
with another contractor that they don't normally work with.
Right.
That tends to be problematic, so what we prefer to do is whatever can be done in kind, it's just outside of the project and can be done separately.
Doesn't get scoped into
But it has to
at
be,
all.
yeah.
Sounds good. I'm tracking.
And then you also have to be
I don't know if
sure,
you wanna ask.
I think this goes without saying, but any of that work that is gonna be part of the project ongoing needs to be, performed by does it have to have
Licensed.
licensed contractor?
And insured, bonded.
Cause
Yeah, it's
I can do
so-
electrical, but you wouldn't want me wiring your.
Right, yeah, no, we want
Commercial.
someone, we wanna, be able to approve who it is, so that we know they're gonna do a good job. We wanna know they have experience, that they're licensed, insured, those kinds of things. We
Okay.
don't want someone getting injured without being covered, things
Right.
like that.
Yep.
So, I'm just gonna throw this out there, cause it's come out before, and I'm not saying that this is gonna happen, but what happens, what we're prepared for, if a contractor doesn't do a complete job, and the general contractor who wins it says, I can't move forward, your volunteer hasn't finished, or did an incomplete job, or comes back to us and says, now I'm gonna give you a change order to make up the work that was done voluntarily that wasn't done properly.
Okay.
Cause that has happened in the city, and I'm not in any way suggesting that's what's gonna happen, I'm just saying, we have to be prepared for that.
That's a risk.
Let me just take just a minute. Kelly, are you able to respond to what you have, and in-kind donations and?
Yeah, sure. Driggs Construction said that they would take out that slab. They also said that they could remove the tree stump for the excavator. Black Landscaping said they would remove those trees for us for free. So, and then grade, just so there's not holes where the trees were. Earthworks said they would give us $5,000 off of a total landscaping job. That's about it that we have so far. We do have a contact that Staker Parsons that's getting back to us on possibly giving us concrete at cost. So we're waiting to hear about that.
Could you formalize those things in writing for Brody?
They're there.
Or like
Yeah,
a,
but
like a
it's-
photo,
Oh,
like a
yeah,
letter
yeah.
from them.
You bet.
Like on their letterhead.
Sure.
Cause yeah, I mean, if we can get all those things, put together, I think that helps this whole RFP process.
I do have a little concern with the discounted one. It's,
Yeah, because what happens if they don't get the whole package?
Cause pricing can be
Yeah.
all over the map, and it's like giving a coupon, like, I'm not saying this is what they're doing, but they could give a 20% coupon, but they upcharge it, the actual price.
So they still need to submit a bid, is what you're saying?
They do.
I would actually prefer either a cash donation or it's all in kind, like they're gonna do it for free. Because you can do, you can do all kinds of things with pricing. So that it sounds like you're giving a discount, but you're not giving that much of a discount.
I see.
Like a blue light special?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, let's say that they say, I'll give you $5,000 off 15 and somebody else bids 7. They're not there's no discount there.
Could we have a pre-construction meeting with those people that are doing in-kind donations and maybe have some affidavit or something that they could sign?
Well, we can do a meeting with them, you know, when they commit.
Yeah, scheduling's important.
And scheduling, yeah.
Would that commit to a schedule?
That'll be a busy season for everyone.
Yes.
And I think both of those, specifically the slab and the removal of trees, can be done prior to starting the project.
could be,
even.
Agreed.
So I think that's a good one.
I think it's a huge opportunity for us, and kudos to the pickleball folks who kind of gone out and done this. We wanna make sure that we make this as painless for everyone involved.
Too late.
But at the same time, we do need to make sure that we do it in such a way that we can make sure that everyone's protected in this.
Right, that's all.
What's them and two.
What's our timeline right now? Again, what have we?
Well, we need the money to match first. I mean, without that, we can't go to bid. Because we're only allocated to matching funds.
Council, I need a number of courts that you think.
Yeah, I think we're at a point with the pickleball course where we have to decide, do we wanna delay and wait for more money to be raised? I know that you've only committed 90.
Yeah.
And that's based on the budget. I think that's all you can commit unless you tap into impact fee money. There's an option of seeing if the fundraising committee wants to spend more time fundraising to reach closer to that budget, or we can try to go out to bid within striking distance of the budget. I don't know that 6 courts is gonna be reasonable unless we get surprised with low costs from the bids.
I think you ought to have them bid 4 and 3 and see where the bids fall. See how close they come in. I mean, if all of them can do 3, but only one of them can do 4, well, maybe that one gets us there.
So, how did we get these numbers?
They're
Yeah,
Brian's
that's the
numbers,
question.
they're estimates based on past
A lot of
projects.
it came from
This is
Tuscany.
crazy high.
We did that in 2017.
Based on what? I'm sorry.
On Tuscany Park, we did that post-tension concrete there, and it's really similar to
It's
this.
almost the same thing.
Could
We
we-
pretty much used those and inflated them a little because they're about 3 years old now.
Could we possibly indicate 3, 4, and 6, just see what each one comes back?
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't make as big a difference going 3 to 4.
Right.
And 4 to 6.
Sometimes some of the stuff is already laid.
It's like when you go to overnight.
Yeah, we could do that.
You
versus
could.
Because
We're still gonna have to decide based on what the actual bids come in.
Yeah, well, we would come back to the council in a work session after the bids come in and say,
Yeah.
okay, here's where they came in. However, at that point in time, I would highly recommend we don't say, oh wait, hold on, we're gonna fundraise for till we get up to 6.
I see.
Because now we've got bidders who spent time putting in a bid,
Right.
and now we're
And
gonna say,
it's
just kidding.
within 60 days, don't we have to?
Yeah, we have to.
45 days is our
45
policy
days,
to
yeah.
award the
That's what I
contract.
thought. Okay.
So I would say if you're dead set on 6, I think we're struggling to get there within our budget. We can try for it and hopefully we're surprised by the cost, but.
In theory, I mean, if we're that close with 4, if we give 3 as an option, then in theory, we're gonna get at least somebody who can do it in budget. But, I mean, I hope we get 4, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But we have to stay within budget.
And we can go out to bid with the 3 options, 6,
Yeah,
4, and
I'd
3.
like to
Thank
do
you.
that.
I would like that.
See a nod,
Yes,
nod.
3 options.
And with the understanding that these items will
Somebody will be awarded.
Budget.
Well, no, I'm saying with the assumption, we need to make sure we go out to all of them with the same agreements that these things are being done
Well,
separately.
only the ones that we get confirmation that are done totally, because you can't do the percentage. That's not a fair.
They become a bidder to the.
They become a bidder.
Okay. Council, I'm gonna move us on, but before I do, I'd like to thank Kelly and the fundraising committee, both of you. It's not often that we get somebody that comes, sees a problem and wants to be part of the solution. Do you have any input that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, we personally think that this bid is a scare tactic for you guys, and, even though Brian's awesome and everything, but there are things in here that we specifically asked not to be. So we feel like we haven't really been heard, or some sort of deliberate ignoring us or something, but, I just got bids back from Wheaton City. They did 8 courts for $100 grand 2 years ago. So, there's no reason for $28,000 of rocks. We don't want that. We don't know why that's there.
Every
We don't want
court
10
in
foot
every city
fencing.
has grass around
You don't
it.
wanna play pickleball in a prison yard. Like, nobody has that. So, and we specifically asked not for that. So we feel like this has been inflated specifically for this meeting to say, we don't want to do 6 courts for whatever. Like the lawnmower reason, you can't do the lawnmower, you've got 10 feet on the other side, you can move your pickleball courts over. You don't have to eliminate 2 of your courts.
The ADA route is an issue too.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Why do we have to pay for the ADA route?
If
it's
it
out of
wasn't
scope.
in the style.
We have to have one.
Okay, but,
Right,
so,
but they're
why is
making us
it
pay
in the
for it, it's in
pickleball
our
bid?
bid.
And we
Because
have to
then, every
fundraise
time
for
there
that?
is one, it has to happen.
But it's already
It's
there.
already there.
And the city has allowed it to expire. So if it was an up to code ADA ramp and we ruined it or had to remove it and move it somehow, that's fine. But we feel like because the city has allowed it to expire, that it's the city's responsibility and not the generous donations of the Rustin brothers, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, that would definitely be still part of the scope of work that we'd have to bid out.
Yeah, we would have to pay for it, but I get that you would, I
Well, no,
understand
you're
your
coming to
point.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, the city, no matter what the city did there, if the city were to build a new pavilion there, we'd have to put that in. And so no matter what we do there, the city will have to put it in.
Well,
And the issue isn't charging the fundraising committee.
Right.
it has to happen.
It just has to be paid for. The city's struggling to find the money too. So, I think what their plan here is to go out to bid and actually get the pricing, and we hope we're wrong. We really do. Because this would be great to have six courts.
And we've almost always been slightly over. I mean, that's just, but that's a healthy estimate to plan for rather than say that, yeah, we're gonna go out, because once in a while, the estimate comes in and then the bid is so out of whack, you can't award it to anybody. So Brian's numbers mean nothing when the actual bids come in. That's what we will actually work off of. This just gives us a scope of what to ask for.
Something else that they did mention in there, was about the cell shades, and I haven't seen those at other pickleball courts either.
Nobody has them. Yeah,
Mm.
we don't
Oh, you
want
already got that taken care
Yeah,
of?
and
Okay.
those can be taken out now
Sales
if you
tables.
want, or we can take them out after we go
Yeah.
out to bid, but,
And
that's $7,500. in
What
the-
was
we
the
don't-
28,000,
Rock.
6-inch minus rock mulch?
Yeah,
That's the
it's
border.
rock.
So around the perimeter,
Yeah.
okay.
We
Could
just want
easily
grass.
not happen.
No.
That's
There
not a
is
big
not that
deal.
in any
Any
other
color. We
city.
don't know where that is.
Yeah.
I mean, and if somebody did mention that, we are just wondering, why wasn't it mentioned to us? Because we all know we have $180,000 to work with, and you all know that I'm gonna push to make that number.
Sure.
So I really feel like we should have been told like, hey, just so you know, we're adding 30 grand of rocks. we just want you to be aware of that, you know, that that's pushing us over our budget, you know?
To be fair to Brian,
work
this
together.
happens every time we design anything in the city. They put out best estimates, we then go after the contractors come in, we take some items, we say, okay, we can't do this project if that's still in, so we line item them out. This has nothing to do with you personally. And that he's not doing this for any, this is the first time did anybody see this before this meeting?
No.
So we had no idea. This is not any reflection on any person.
But the questions are still fair, and I'm grateful for their knowledge base because I don't have it, so thank you.
And then we just request before the bid, the RFP goes out, can we see that? Can we say like, okay, before that is sent?
You can say, you can see it, this group that will obtain
Sure.
it and
Sure.
administration.
It was just one of those where we met on Tuesday and we specifically asked for certain things, and the very next day, something different was in front of our eyes. We were kind of like, oh, we just wanna be sure that what we want for everybody is what is getting bid.
Yeah, what we had talked about in our meeting was removing some things. The idea is, we can still go out to bid, cause what if it comes in within the budget, we'd want those things back in. So when you go out to bid, you wanna have everything that you would like, and then you can come back. We don't wanna go out to bid and already strike things that we
I see what
would have
We've done that
wanted.
with almost every project.
bare bones proposal.
Yeah, we don't wanna go out to bid with the bare bones, we wanna be able to trim back after we get the pricing.
And I think it's good that we've said we want the 3, 4, and 6 bids so that we know if we do want 6, that there are things we can't get, but we can still get 6 under our budget, so.
And if we can, we can. That's great.
Yes, sir.
Can I make a comment? I've been heavily involved with pickleball the last few years. The fewer courts you build, the more ineffective it is. Layton has tried, they put a few 2-court facilities around. Nobody goes to them. You put 6, you get people coming there. No, I don't, go to the, every day the pickleball is open at the rec center, Tuesday, Thursday for open play. There's 4 courts there now. Every one of them's full. You're waiting a half, there's 5 or 6 stacks of paddles, which is how you rotate through. You're waiting a half hour to play on 4 courts. You go to 3, you're gonna eliminate it. It's a community deal. It brings people in from teenagers to adults, can play together. It's not, oh, it's a kid's game, it's an adult game. It's from teenagers. I've got a 10, 11-year-old. He begs me to go play. There's nowhere to play in Syracuse.
I'm gonna ask that you suspend. The reason why we're here is to also understand that the city is working with the budget. You know, like all of our budgets in our home. And if we don't have money for milk, then we have to, you know. So what I'm gonna suggest, council, and I'd just like to see your nod, is a 3, 4, and 6 proposal with the option to line item delete in that RFP. And then if you would like to come and see the RFP, what we're putting out to bid, you're welcome to come. It's public record. We'd like to see that, and then we invite you back to the discussion when we look at those lines. So we're all on the same team. We're not trying to undermine what anybody does, and I want to personally express my personal appreciation for you being willing to solve a problem. And it's like I said in the beginning, the fact that somebody comes with an issue and wants to help solve it, that's great. I want to turn that off. And you guys have been terrific. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me move us on. Steve, could we discuss the budget opening?
Alright, so in your packet, you'll have the discussion on the budget opening. I'm not going to go through everything in detail unless you'd like me to. I've kind of framed this in years past. Seth, for you, this is probably your first time seeing it. So.
You got too many of my emails, it sounds like.
No, it's a good question. So the way I framed it is 2 different sections, our capital projects and then our operational. So anything in green on this page are new projects being proposed to bring on. and some of them are time sensitive, and that's why they're here. Shoreline development and fields development, those are in line with those new subdivisions coming in. These are improvements to infrastructure to handle that, those developments.
So these are expected.
Yep.
Yep. And the majority of that, 520,000 and 469,000, the majority of that is the storm drain impact, which we do have money in the fund to take care of. And road impact is another big one. So the bulk of them are impact fee funds, and that's the purpose of those funds. When the homes come in, we'll collect money to reimburse the fund back. So, and there is some more description below those if you want to know what streets are affected and where they're going in. And then
I do have a question about this, and I'm not objecting to the funds. I understand how it works, and we have to do what we have to do. But the question came up during this process: how do we work with the development so that all these costs don't end up on the city? How do we include some of the, because I understand that if it's within the development, that makes more sense. But some of these times that we get significant developments like this one that is, you know, several hundred homes, we absolutely know that it's going to have an impact on the associated roads and the associated system.
Okay.
How do we not find a way to include that as not the city's cost?
And we do that through developers agreements, but for example, the road impact for 2400 West,
yeah,
they're going to be responsible for half the road, right?
Right, but we're going to have to do the
my
whole
understanding
road
is we want to do the other half at the same time.
Right.
So.
But how do we,
So it's
what I'm
based
saying
on-
in the future, how do we get them to do the whole road? Because we wouldn't touch the road
Yeah,
otherwise.
it's based on the traffic generation that their development is gonna produce.
Right.
And how wide the road needs to
Has
be
to be.
to handle just their traffic. That's what they're responsible for.
That's the problem, is
Yeah.
because now it creates a new dynamic of the road, meaning without them, the road can be a smaller road, a less trafficked road. Now that they're going to be a part of it, we need a different road.
It's kind of like when our bids though for the culinary tank, it's due to new growth, but we're still going to use it. So legally, we can't charge the whole thing to new growth.
I know, and I'm
That's-
asking
it
if there's a
comes
way
down
that
to
we
it.
can include more. I get what was going on, but is there not a way that we can include more so that the city is not bearing the responsibility?
So the city's not really bearing this, the impact fees are paying for this, so the new development is paying for it, it's just being spread out
It's
among all the new
being
development.
spread amongst those citizens as they pay their impact fee.
As they come in.
But again, the problem is we have to front it and wait for them to move in and pay it back.
That's why we have our.
Yeah,
funds
well,
funded.
so we've been, the way it works is.
We've been gathering
We
it,
have
I
a
know.
like a 6-year plan.
Right.
We've been gathering from residents all over
I
the
know.
city as they come in. And that will fund some projects here, some projects there. But the point is, over the timeframe of the plan, all those projects get paid for from all of the development. So we'll have the money to do it. We have the cash from impact fees because of development. And so it's a.
And then when
it's
your
a whole-
fees are paid, then
Well-
that pays forward.
Yep.
Yep.
I get where you.
Yeah, build out, it's,
It
all
ends up paying
equalizes.
Yeah,
for it.
at one point it
Pay for it.
equalizes, but
Well, you can't
Sometimes there's
charge
gaps.
a developer for, impact fees that haven't been charged because nobody's living there yet. I mean,
I know, but-
it is an impact fee because it impacts our city and the fee comes to us and we pay for roads.
But this goes, I mean, this is a part associated with the debate of, do we have to raise taxes on the current residents to accommodate the changes that will be here for growth? I'm not saying that that's what, but that's where we get that dilemma, is things cost more down the road, and we never seem to catch up.
Well, eventually your road in front of your house will have to be replaced, and
Yeah.
everybody will help to pay for that
I was
too.
gonna say, even if these new roads are gonna be around for a lot longer than our previous roads. So everybody has to, our initial impact fee doesn't take care of what our impact is. It does an initial impact, but it doesn't take care of long-term
Right.
impact. So fees have to be there and taxes have to be there to pay for a replacement of the
I'm
road.
not suggesting that, I'm saying that when the new development comes in, how come we can't assess some of the change? Well, I mean, I feel like we always get shortchanged on the
Maybe in
change.
a perfect world. we
Is that
could
done
figure it all
anymore, or is
out.
that? I would argue that our impact fees are covering all of this.
The real cost.
The real cost.
Yeah.
Sounds like
It's a
not
call-in
legal.
exaction.
Initial cost is being paid for
Like,
by impact
like
fees.
none of this is coming out of our general fund.
Yeah, and we know that legally, the impact fees that we charge have to pay for the
have
actual
to be
impact of what's being
justified
taken
by-
care of. So that's what's
Steve,
going on.
you wanna go on with
Sure.
Neener, neener.
There's also $20,000 for a survey of 2400 west, south of that development and through the green parcel we've talked about previously. We're also gonna do 2000 west. We noticed when designing that project, we found a small length of pipe that we wanna upgrade with that. That's an additional
How small?
10,000. How much is Brian in here?
It's interesting that there would just be a portion of pipe.
I'm not sure, it's not gonna be a long stretch, I wanna say like 100 feet, so.
Needs to be
That's just
time,
not fun.
let's do
We
it.
figure let's do it with the project that's coming.
Yeah.
That takes care of our capital, other than the pickleball course we discussed as well. In our operational budget, we have a few grants that have come through. One is for an active shooter gear, this is actually for the fire department. That is 100% funded, $3,800. And then UDOT came back and are gonna award some preservation funds to the museum in the tune of $8,000. That's 100% funded as well. We have a MOU that I think we're working on with that grant. $9,000 for appraisals of UDOT and city lands around West Davis corridor. And then pickleball courts we talked about. Moving the Founders Park West out to the 2021 fiscal year, so that zeroes out in 2020. Park Impact Fund, we need to update our IFFP and IA plans for this impact fee. We've done that periodically throughout the last few years. That's $20,000 more. And then with the shoreline development, they've actually given us money instead of water shares. We have $142,000 this year that they've given us. We're just recognizing that money coming in, earmarking it to buy water shares when they come available. Last two I have on here is in the Information Technology Fund. The $15,000 for the access control system. This is one I was gonna request for the 2021 budget. We did have an issue with our fire department billing. It's on a similar system that as you swipe your card and come in, it's a little bit different. The system's old enough now that it actually, we've had issues with being able to update names, replace names in it, and so we're requesting to put it in now so we can do a citywide enhancement of our access control system. This program runs off of Windows XP. That tells you how old the program is. It was put in when a lot of these buildings were built. So this is just moving it up from a July, August timeframe to now to get that done. And then $6,000 I'm requesting for phase 2 of the cameras at the community center. That would get community center, and we did city hall, and then the police is done as well. So that'd be 3 buildings done if we could put that in the budget for the community center.
Those cameras, are these the cameras that cover the safe trade zone that I saw the police department set up?
Good question.
No. There already are cameras on.
They're already on that.
Yeah, that have.
We need to do something, this is off the topic of this ever so slightly, but we need to put something out to make sure people know that's there.
Okay.
The safe exchange zone.
I used it. It was very safe.
I'm glad. That's the intent.
That is it with the budget opening. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions for him? Of course, we'll have a public hearing on the clearing number 10, so. Okay. So do you wanna do we'll move to G? Steve?
Yeah, so RFP for audit services, it's been 6 years since we bid this out. Typically, you wanna go around 5 years. And so we did put out the bid for the RFP. We had 5 bidders. In the packet, you can see the results. All the firms are qualified to do the audit. So we did evaluate them based on not only price, but qualifications, technical experience, and responsiveness with their proposal. Based on that, Gilbert and Stewart actually had the low bid, and had the highest total points.
Sorry, yeah, I was reviewing that thinking, wow.
That's a big difference, 10 grand.
busy
It's also
or
really
like
good to rotate once in a while. It's really a bad form to use the same auditor for 10 years because then people start to question.
They're very experienced and Price is Right.
And I was impressed that they actually audit cities like Orem and, South Jordan, so cities bigger than us. As well as cities about our size and even smaller, so they do have the experience to do the audit.
That's good. I'd
Council,
say
can I-
consent on
Can I
that.
see a nod, can we put this on consent?
That's money. Can we do that on consent, or does that have to be public?
Unless we're gonna debate it some more.
We'd have to
No, but-
award the RFP, I don't know if you have to have a
I don't
public
think we
hearing.
can do it. I just don't think we can do it.
If there's a public hearing.
You don't have to have a hearing as long as it's budgeted.
It is budgeted.
Okay.
And this would take place for the next fiscal year starting, or the fiscal year we're in, so they would pick up an audit, fiscal year 2020.
Nice.
So this, contract is for the old people, Kennington
Yeah,
Christensen and Terry Palmer.
Yeah, I just put a template in there so you can read the language.
Great.
We'll go through and fine tune it, make sure that everything's appropriate.
Okay.
Consent calendar?
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. All right, go on.
Thanks, Steve.
We'll be back on stage.
Alright, this next item is another final plat. It's Criddle Farms North, Phase 3. Pretty straightforward, bunch of new lots. It's been through planning commission. Everything's looking good.
So is this the one with the park
Mhm.
in it?
No.
This is with the.
I was trying to figure out, oh, it's the one.
Used to.
Okay, so this
That's what I was
one's
trying to figure out.
north is this way.
West, 4,000 west.
So north is up to the left. That's where
Up to the left.
Up, you know. So here's the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
And see, there's the
East
second
up.
half of that is phase 2. This is phase 3. Right here, so here's 4,000 west.
So the park comes into
That
the last
existing
phase?
Nope, park
Is right here. Okay, that's what I was curious about. I was a little bit confused on this.
No, I think that's already in.
Okay.
This parking lot is in, but they haven't finished the improvements. They're working on a pool. The sidewalk, the trail, the widened sidewalk ends right there, but they'll be extending it here and burying the trail. There's an existing historic home right here, and that's part of that space.
Okay.
But the developer's here too. You probably, I should just had him answer your question there, sorry.
I just can't remember what we were doing, so it is, I forgot about the pool thing.
Consent.
Any discussion?
No.
Council?
Just as long as those items get
Is the applicant here?
addressed through
Any,
engineering. Yes.
would like to address them at all? The move, would
love
look.
working with you, and this would just be another good phase.
Okay.
Moving forward.
Consent calendar, dates recommended?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Okay,
Next up is the continuation of our conversation about the mixed-use development zone. There's a gentleman that stood up about, there's a formatting error. It really was supposed to say 85.
It got fixed. I mean,
Yeah,
we saw that.
it was just a weird thing that happens sometimes with PDF conversion. But yeah, so we talked, there's basically two issues that we're talking about. What does it mean to be adjacent? I think that's in the rearview mirror. The next is the idea of a ratio to commercial. Well, so I've got this table here. So first of all, we've talked about all around about having a minimum ratio. I don't recommend having a minimum ratio. However, if we do want to go down this road, I think that it should be realistic. So I've provided a table of some common square footages of commercial uses. And so I want you to imagine a apartment complex and what kind of commercial that could support. So if we're imagining that we're gonna get a grocery store on a site and we zone it mixed use, and we really want the grocery store, we should probably just keep it commercial if that's really what we want. So there's a certain feasibility, and every site's different, but I think it's feasible to think, okay, we have an apartment complex and maybe they have a barber shop or a coffee shop or something within that development, proximity to other commercial areas. So that's my recommendation. Obviously, you guys can, if you wanna go down the minimum ratio road, you can, but I put that at, so let me go to the actual text. This is just a stab at
It's the 1,200 per 100.
what it could say. It's basically 1,200 square feet per 100 units. So the more units you have, the more they'd be required. And then there's also a phrase that says, we want as much as possible, and we encourage that beyond the minimum. And that's something that can be assessed when you have a request to change the zone, whether or not, you know, it's enough. This in the ordinance is a minimum ratio that would be enforced administratively after they would get a zone change, you know, to make sure. But when you get a zone change, it's still a legislative matter, and if you don't like the proposal, you don't feel like it's meeting of the mixed use, the spirit of the mixed use zone, you could not approve it.
So basically, it explicitly states that our purpose here is to maximize the amount of the commercial in the mix.
And I think, if I remember correctly, when we created the zone, the intent was to quote, or, you know, theoretically squeeze out a little bit of extra commercial where we might not have gotten it. So if it was 100% mixed, or if it was 100% residential, obviously there's no commercial component there, and so mixed use would have, in this, it would require at least something. Maybe that's not enough, but that becomes a site-specific application of the zone. And then the other thing that we put in here was the removal of having to have commercial in each building. And I think we've already kind of talked about that. I think we're all cool with that. So the ratio issue is really, I think, the other main thing. And then, and I don't know if so they got, there was the developer emailed you guys about.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a development, and that's very important.
I agree.
And I think that needs to be stated publicly. Any discussion we have about the zone is not a reflection on anyone's application.
I agree. But it's been requested to increase the allowable setback and parking lot location. And so that, if you're interested, now we're talking about the zone.
Well, then you're talking about your distance again, that we already kinda solved.
So the request is to allow parking lots and increase setbacks for buildings.
Not right on the.
So, and that's something that you could consider, but it wasn't really something that we've already been talking about, so.
Yeah.
As far as staff recommendation and as far as what we've envisioned with the zone, having an increased setback makes it so that it's less pedestrian friendly, and it makes it so it's not quite as convenient to walk onto the sidewalk. And
But see, I'm okay with that out on the periphery. I think in the town center, no. I think when we don't have any specific items recommended for our town center yet. So the town center, I want to make as walkable as possible. But out further away, I just don't see there being a ton of people walking down Antelope.
So you're talking about town center, you're talking about 2,000?
Yes.
2,000 Antelope and possibly
so not
extending.
Not the community center or the development center,
Right.
but town center. Okay.
So in our general plan, we have an area defined as a town center, and things that cannot go in town centers anymore, we have some exceptions, are like car washes and big automotive type items. And so mainly because those are walkable, they are not walkable, they're loud, and so they decrease the ambiance. However, once you extend out beyond the town center, I think us trying to make it walkable for someone along Antelope just seems kind of silly. And I'll leave that up to you guys to see if you agree, but.
See, and I asked the question, how far out is still considered town center? Cause I think you're gonna get debate on that. I think there are gonna be people that say your town center ended with one block off, and other
You
people.
drew a picture in the general plan, and I'm willing to follow that.
And if I could respond to, just clarify as far as why it's important concerning planning, it's more than just, I mean, walkability, we all walk whether we're in the town center or not, and some of these sites are adjacent to some existing commercials, so we wanna have good connections there.
Agreed.
But it's also, in urban design, there is a principle called transparency. So you have, along every street you have an edge. And buildings usually define that edge. And sometimes that building edge is close to the street and sometimes it's pulled back. And sometimes that edge is like a wall, and sometimes it has, think of windows and permeability. And so in urban design, as you study the attractiveness, whether you're driving or walking, it can be the same if you're driving through and you're looking at a blank wall, or if you're looking at something that's set so far back from the road, you lose interest and you lose that unique character that we're going for. And so that's my concern, is that as we increase those setbacks and allow, the main thing that you're looking at as you go through our major thoroughfare to be parking lot and cars or attractive architecture. And so good planning principle and, you know, standard best practice currently is to embrace this concept of transparency along the street edge.
So then make it so there can only be one row of parking in there. I guess what I'm saying is, I agree with you that I don't want Antelope to be a giant row of parking lots, because that would be terrible. That would look very ugly.
Sure.
But I'm okay allowing a setback such that there is enough room for a road and one row of diagonals or something like that. Make it, I just feel like we're going for this urban atmosphere when I don't feel we are an urban community. We are a more of a country feel. I don't feel like I need to have Salt Lake or even I love the idea of having a little area that has, you know, shops on the side and little places I can sit down and eat because we can eat on the sidewalk. I would love to live in a France type environment, but we're not France.
No, and we're not urban either.
We're not urban.
We're not, but we talk about it a lot.
Well, in the purpose of the zone, it even says that this will be the most urban part of the city. Doesn't mean that we're downtown Salt Lake all of a sudden.
But I think
it just means that maybe we have some of those principles in play. And so think of a rural area, they still have a main street a lot of times historically. So we're just creating some of those designed areas.
But that main street doesn't extend for 3 miles.
Sometimes, but it depends on the market. So yeah, I don't mean to argue. It's really up to you guys to debate. But if you're asking staff input as far as that item that we haven't discussed yet, whether or not to increase the setbacks and allow the parking lot, it's up to you, but I don't recommend it.
The whole idea is to be very purposeful about what we do.
Agreed.
And so, and
Can
some places are.
I ask a question? No, I don't generally like to get into the mix because I want you to make a decision. Do we lose the benefit of form-based code the further back we put it from the road?
Well, I mean, one of the aspects of form-based code is you have some flexibility, and you stop paying attention so much about the metrics of numbers per unit. So I think we looked at a bunch of pictures, right? And that's the form that we had in mind. And adding large setbacks and parking lots goes away from the form that we had in mind. So if we want to change direction of the form that we had in mind to be more of a, I hate to say this, but more of a cookie cutter suburban apartment complex with separate out parcels of fast food and big parking lots, that's fine. Lots of communities do that. It's just not unique.
Can I ask a question? Are you talking about 1475?
We're not talking about
Just
any
the
development.
Oh, any mix. Just the
This
general
is just
mixed use.
generic.
So just going back, I know we got a little bit off down the road a little bit, but on the ratio piece, I was just trying to figure out, are you recommending then striking the 1,200 per 100?
Well, it would, this is
Completely?
not adding as opposed to striking.
It wasn't there in
It
the first
wasn't
place.
there, so he's
Sure.
proposing.
Yeah,
to
that's
add
my
it,
question,
but-
is,
I,
are you?
I don't propose that we add this, but this is there because of our last week's conversation. If you remember, initially I just, that's wasn't there, but if you guys wanted to go down this road, this
I'd like
is
to
just
throw
that.
out another concept, and that would be that we want, the whole purpose of discussing this originally was, we want more commercial. And for commercial, we're willing to give up some density to achieve the commercial that the city needs. So along that line, what if we base the density on the amount of commercial proposed?
I think the reason why we think that the rooftops and or, I should say, dwellings, whatever, we were trying to get our numbers so that we could attract more commercial. Cause obviously we don't have commercial knocking on our door right now. And so, and a lot of them have a national metric of what they require in order to come here.
If that was the case, we should have just put an
And-
apartment zone,
well,
because if that's all we're asking for is apartments, rooftops.
It's saying that this area is mixed between commercial and living in order to help the businesses there, plus also attract more.
So, are
It's
you
both.
saying that you don't agree that there should be,
No.
okay, cause what does everybody else think? Cause I think if the point is to get commercial, the density should be contingent on how much commercial is proposed.
So you're requesting that we actually incentivize the incentivize
Incentivize
the
the
commercial
com-
by density. Say,
Yes.
you know, if you can do this much commercial, we'll give you
A higher density.
But then we.
40 per acre.
Then are we running into an issue with requiring what kind of commercial?
Mm-mm.
Cause what if they say, well, that's going to be commercial, but it's our gym?
Well, and some
That's
people,
on-
That's not
and
commercial.
some people will say though, like for instance, that Walmart, which covers a very large footprint of square feet, but maybe doesn't bring in as much as like cold storage does, US Cold Storage. So I'm just, it may not, but do you know what I'm saying? But some
May not.
businesses will bring in more per square foot than others, so I think you're kind of,
Well,
you're messing with,
that preassumes that we're doing this by
ambiguity.
square foot, and I'm not suggesting that's the only metric we use.
well, I think that there's a lot of ambiguity with it because you can't have every single possibility out there nailed down. That's why
No,
we
but I
decided to
think
go
that
with
we could
form-based in the
decide-
first place.
And it's not working.
Well, at least for you it's not, but I think it's actually a good product.
I think all we're getting is apartments.
That can be your opinion, that's fine. I disagree.
I've got it. We can, if they build 1,200 square feet of commercial, they can build 100 units.
Well, look at.
So
I'm
the point
I'm
of
kidding.
2,400 square feet.
Council, let me return to Dave. I don't think you got a chance to get everything on the table. You
No.
can put it on the table.
So it can be more than just square footage. It can, the more business condos or the more business units, maybe a higher density of those units is equal to a bigger unit. I mean, I don't wanna make this too complicated, but the point being that if we get more of what we want, then you can justify more units. Otherwise, we're just giving up a whole bunch of units and we're not getting anything that we ever asked for.
So in the end, back to the previous conversations we've had, you are wanting commercial on the hook before we agree to anything. Because otherwise we can't agree to any development at all unless they have certain commercial lined up.
Well, I think that we've seen attempts to say there are this many commercial units available, that they would be, so, you know, I don't know that you have to have everyone on the hook. I would prefer them that way, sure.
Well, that'd be grand, but it's unrealistic, again.
So that's why I'm not saying that that's a mandatory part, but you build strip malls all the time saying that you can fill those units. So I'm not suggesting that we build a strip mall in here, but I'm saying the same concept applies. This many available business units equals this much density.
It could work. I'm trying to imagine what the end product would look like and analyze that for you. I haven't obviously had time to analyze that, but as long as the end product looks like the form that we have in mind, whatever we need to do to incentivize that commercial, because I think we're all on the same page. We want to get as much commercial as possible out of the property. But sorry, let me just finish. My fear is that if the developer's expecting a certain payback based off of the amount of commercial he gets, we might end up with more dense. Like imagine they do like 20,000 square feet and then they're like, okay, well the ordinance says that I get however many units because I put this much, and then we end up with like 5 stories of apartments that's between the commercial.
And that's where we have to get the gauging right. We can't do it out of control. I'm not going straight up from where we are. I think that the key would be, when we talked about this originally, we said, what are we going to allow? Are we going to allow for 3 stories? And the first reaction that was a majority at the time was, I'd allow a 3rd story if the first story is commercial. So right now what we're getting is all 3 stories are not commercial and there's some commercial somewhere else. So what I'm suggesting is that rather than say it's just about the stories, let's talk about the components. If there's enough commercial components in there, then that would be justified. If not, it's not justified to go to that kind of density, because right now we're talking about densities we've never had in the city, and we're basically only talking about apartments. We're not really talking about getting the commercial with it. I'm suggesting that we have to have some commercial in there that is significant enough to the number of units that we're getting. Yeah.
So, I've brought this up before. I'm going to bring it up again. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Our goal is to get more commercial. There's clearly a strong market for multifamily residential. If we were to, in our zone or in our ordinance, allow for the commercial to be built, but not necessarily on the same site, I think you may be able to have greater success at getting our goal of successful commercial in the city. And I'll give you an example. So we've got an empty commercial pad right next to Walgreens. We've got an empty commercial pad right next to Warren's. You know, what if a person who wants to build apartments, a developer who wants to build apartments, were to partner and get one of those commercial pads built as part of the requirement. So it has to be obviously close to the development, but maybe not on the same parcel.
Like a TDR, transfer development.
So you could almost partner, and so that within a certain distance or whatever from your apartment site, you have to bring so much commercial. That meets our goal.
I agree with you. And I think that maybe there's an interesting way to approach that. I do think there has to be some parameters. You say within a certain distance. Sure. I agree with that. Sure. I think it also has to be maybe within the parameters of, yeah, I would hate to, I guess, I'm not sure how to word this, but for example, if somebody were to say, okay, I want to build apartments just down the street here, but I'm going to wait for KFC to finally build on that lot and then call them my partner. To me, that doesn't work, because that's been projected for years and years, even though they haven't come. That's just waiting for somebody else to say, I'm taking credit for what they're doing.
Well, it sounds like what you're proposing, though, is having somebody on the hook, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we're struggling with is getting commercial and enough commercial that's viable in a location that they're wanting to build apartments.
Right. So then are we talking about we would diminish the amount of apartments in that zone, which is kind of what you talked about a couple weeks ago, where you would diminish the height and maybe density in general because we're not requiring commercial on that plat. I don't know, I'm just asking, is that what you're considering?
Well, I think there's gotta be still a relationship of how much commercial they're bringing
Right.
versus how many apartments they're building, cause.
I can't have
you know.
400 apartments justified by one Burger King a mile away.
I guess what it does is it encourages developers to work together to build the city.
And maybe that's the real problem, is that we've got residential developers and we've had commercial developers, and they're not the same people.
Except for that the right group is both. They usually do
All right,
commercial.
I'm not, okay, I'm projecting that maybe in general,
Well, I'm just saying
this is
that
a problem, is that.
I'm just saying, I'm grateful that they have both. You know, that
Okay.
luckily they're the experience with attracting a commercial.
So it would be easier for them, which is great, and I'm all for that. That is
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's why I really like their group in the first place.
Okay, but
I was gonna say, we could explore the idea of bonus density, which then we're into counting units and stuff, you know, we're getting away from some of the form, which is attractiveness, but in a traditional bonus density
forms aren't
scenario.
working now.
Yeah, in a traditional bonus density scenario, it's kind of a if-then scenario. If they do this, then they
I know,
do
but,
that.
and we've done that in the past, and we did that with our RPC zone.
So
where
other
we
than,
allowed for bonus density.
so other than the commercial element, what about the form-based is bothering you? Because it's about how the look and the feel and if it works for our area, for where we're trying to boost retail and help out our overall sales and taxes and are keeping businesses from going belly up, so forth. I mean, what about the form-based? I'm honestly asking, what about the form-based do you not like?
I
Other than
don't
the
like the
commercial.
product that we're getting, it lacks commercial.
So other than the commercial form-based is okay?
You just want more
The
commercial.
whole point was to gain commercial. If we're not getting commercial, then it's
Okay,
not working.
it's an element of it, is what I'm trying to nail down.
That's what I just
The
told
amount
you.
of it.
That's the element that isn't working.
Okay.
We have a
Thank you.
CDA, and, you know, we can incentivize these buildings to be built, but the amount of money that we have up front is probably insufficient to
Yeah,
convince them
I'm
to
not-
build a spec building, but we could help them fill or we can do tax rebates to help them
The
build more
incentive is the
commercial.
apartments. It's not the incentive can't be, I'm gonna pay for it as well. I'm gonna tell you that if you can build it on spec and let it sit vacant, we'll pay for it. That's a lose-lose venture.
Yeah, so
I
we
agree
have-
on that.
I think what he's saying is, though, is the apartments generate property tax that goes to the CDA. You use that money to incentivize tenants to go into the building.
Oh, I don't mind incentivizing tenants in a business building.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's what he's saying, if it helps the
All right, that did
CDAs
not
work
come
better.
across very clear.
But I-
Because we've done that at Giza and it worked very well, and I'm happy to do it again.
I actually like this is something I've actually been a proponent of for a while, is I don't think all the commercial has to be on the site.
Okay?
And so I actually like Berta's idea of saying, I do think it should be within walking distance because most of these, and walking distance we define as what, a mile?
Well, in parks, we called it a half mile because it was a quarter and we stretched it to a half.
Well, hopefully everyone's not dragging all their kids down the
I'm not,
road.
I'm just saying,
But-
we can't
literally,
use
like,
different standards across the board.
literally parked at Dollar Tree and then got in my car and then drove to the cookie place.
Shame on you.
And I'm not the only
If you're
one.
going to the cookie place, you needed to walk.
I
But-
have kids, yeah.
So what you're telling me is walkability doesn't matter.
So if walkability is not a feature,
Then we can move all
throw
the,
that right out.
we're good then.
When you calculate what's walking distance, it depends on.
The person,
On how big the individual
I think we
is.
just, I think we just, we define it and
Yeah.
we put it in code.
Yeah.
Then
So
we can deal with that.
I am okay with that because that does allow for some, I want to encourage some of our empty lots to be built up as well.
yes.
And so I'm okay with that scenario, but I do think that, like, I would go so far as to say that if they are below say 1,500 square feet per 100 units, they only get 2 stories. If they go above that, they can go to 3 stories, but I think that's, somehow we need to make it clear that the commercial is the integral part of this. And we want all of these residents, we want these neighbors, these friends that are going to go to these businesses, but in the end, when we originally envisioned this, the 3rd story was so that the commercial could go on the bottom floor. Because we don't do 3 stories in Syracuse.
We don't.
And that was actually recommended by planning commission, being vertical height, because they really like places like Holiday and such, but we're definitely different demographic than Holiday.
And the thing is,
And I agree
3
with
stories
that.
is more difficult for fire departments. It's more, there's just a lot of issues with 3 stories, and so if we're going to 3 stories, it's because they are approaching maybe 2,000 square feet per acre, or above 1,500, or something like that.
Per acre, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so how do we, let's say we went with Brody's idea and they say, I've got these tenants on the hook and we're going to develop this, or we're going to fill this space. Then what happens if one of them leaves?
That's where the CDA comes into play.
That we just keep
We-
incentivizing to keep
Incentivize
someone there?
replacement?
Well,
thing is, generally-
you're benefited by the fact that the commercial space is built.
Yeah.
Even if it's vacant, I mean, they pay property
And we
tax,
just
but
got some
we don't
more
want
people
that.
to support them.
Yeah, we don't want them to.
That's where the
to
walking
suffer.
distance is paramount.
And it's
But
more
yeah, we would
appealing,
have
because now there's more people. in it.
Program to help incentivize new tenants. But, and sometimes you have no control, sometimes it's mismanagement of the tenant and they fail.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Sometimes it's, it's just an illness, guy
But
closes up
I
shop
think
and sees
on
no
the
help.
whole, like when you look at the whole program, it'll be pretty
We should
successful.
keep it stable.
I like Jordan's idea. I think that makes a lot of sense. If that's historically how we got to 3 stories, this is a good compromise for us, and I think
Okay, let's put that on the table, council. A certain square footage of business property.
So now we have to figure out what
So
that square
then we'll have
footage
to
is.
say what they're allowed to have according to what their ratio is.
I'm going to call this
Per
discussion, I'm gonna call the discussions to send Noah back.
400 units or
I'm gonna call the discussion here in 5 minutes, but do you agree with his concept of a certain square footage of business for 2-story and a certain square footage for 3?
And you're talking about commercial square footage.
Commercial square footage for residential space.
I think it's definitely worth looking at.
Okay. Noah, can I send you back to the drawing board, one more time?
So,
it might not just be
square
one
feet, commercial in a certain tier.
Within a half mile.
Tier what? Tier 1, 2, 3?
Give us some options.
In order to go to a
So-
3rd level.
All right, so if you want, so you threw out 1,500 per acre gets you our standard.
1,500 square feet of commercial
Per acre. Gets you what we allow today. So to go up from there, I gotta get,
Per acre.
So the one side we have is 16
Well, we
acres.
don't know.
We have this
22,000.
thing
Or is it per
right
100
here.
units?
Yeah, we have it as
This
units.
one here.
That's not
So let's
feasible.
go higher. If we're
well,
gonna
no,
go
because
for
then you
that.
start to get
That's not
units
even-
that are really small to
You're
fit
talking
those.
about-
I think it's a PetSmart.
Oh,
if we-
you're talking about
Yeah.
square footage of,
It's
Of
not even a
commercial.
ballpark.
but I mean,
But
like an
also-
acre, it
Speak to
has
that.
to be specific how much, okay.
I don't want any of these
Yeah,
units
start
to
back to
become
the
so
drawing board.
small.
Can we
that they're
imagine-
Council,
Yeah, that's not
I'm gonna suspend discussion here now in the economy of time. Noel, would you lead us in a further discussion of this idea? And give us 2 or 3 options,
Sure.
would you? That we can look at cause I think that right now, we're just kinda swatting at
We're
flies.
spitballing it here.
Let's look at
It
some
has to be
specific
based on
scenarios.
something.
Yeah,
We
You
need to
have to
look
kind of
at
figure out
actual.
what those factors are, so that they're.
Council, if you wanna give Noah some email advice, do that. Let's move on to 3.
Oh, you mean empty lots?
That's another option for them to consider.
Noah, let's move on to 3.
Okay, general plan closure. Currently, our ordinance establishes open amendment periods and closed amendment periods.
on the first month of the odd year, you may
Under a
amend
full
the
moon.
yeah, something
Hold
like
your
that.
mouth just right.
You may amend the general plan. Outside of that open amendment period, you can petition council for a special out of the open period opening, which we've received many of those. But you can only do that if they meet certain criteria. So we talked about just removing this whole mess altogether to make it more straightforward. We can amend the general plan when we get an application or when we want to. Done.
My thing is, sorry, I'll let you finish and then.
Thank you.
I don't know who's leading this out.
And
I'm
I was just
excited.
gonna finish, planning commission reviewed this, they are okay with removing it, they voted for that unanimously.
Yeah, no, I mean, just being there in the planning commission, thank you for the experience and the opportunity to serve there.
Thank you.
Being there, some of the comments were around, are we pro-development or not, or are we interested in staying stagnant, or, and this is different from the rest of our neighboring communities, and so there's a lot to be said about that. Doesn't change any of our legislative powers, abilities to look at plan
Is that
review.
verifiable? Do none of the neighboring cities have a restriction?
Nobody does this.
I've talked to everyone that I know of on mosquito baby, none of them do.
Just asking, because I know that
uncommon.
most don't,
It's
but.
uncommon.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just very
Valid
restrictive.
point.
So I'm in
It's valid
favor of
point.
reviewing, them on the merits of their own plans and recommendations and.
Well, and I remember reading that you said originally they thought it would diminish the pressure on staff, you wouldn't have to see as much, but it hasn't done any of that, so if that was
Just creates an
a
extra
part of
step.
the point, then it's
One
not
more
helping,
meeting, one more
so,
staff
yeah,
report.
yeah.
I had two more questions on there. So one of the sections that was crossed out, it was just around the order that plans are being received and what order we review them. Section D3 in there. So how is that then prioritized? Is that described elsewhere?
D3.
Commission shall consider applications for proposed amendments, is that what you're looking at? To the general plan text, to map?
I wrote it out from my.
There will need to be renumbering of all the items
With subsection
in F, and then also anything after.
In the same order, by which they were
Sorry, I
It's
don't know.
pretty hard to record for all reading.
Yeah. Good point.
Yes, I'm just trying to figure out, is there something that stipulates how the order is then dictated, or is that just being crossed out because it's spelled out elsewhere?
So the idea here was there was gonna be a batch of map amendments or general plan amendments, and so we would just look at them in the order they received. But we're just gonna look at them in the order they come in as they trickle
Okay.
in. So we're not gonna have the batch issue, we just, like usual, as soon as it's ready to go before the commission, we'll put it before the commission.
Okay.
Right.
And
Sorry,
then,
I didn't understand what you were saying there. Thank you, Paul.
yeah, and then G3, it talked about, man, there's so many that are numbered and lettered the same, so I gotta find it.
G, procedure?
Yeah, I don't know, I'll have to look at it.
So the procedure for a general plan, now that we cross this out, will be the person applies, we go to planning commission, we go to city council. Or city council wants to initiate something, they send something to planning commission for recommendation and they send it back.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't like.
The only thing
eliminating
that
process.
concerns me here, because I think that this is just adding a ridiculous step at this point. But the point of having this policy at all was to not be overwhelmed with applications. And I do think that we get an abundance of applications that some of them are just kind of out there. And what do we do to empower staff to say, look, this doesn't follow our code in the following ways, or.
I think we already do.
Well, I'm concerned that.
Talking about like pre-screening applications
A little
before
bit.
it comes to you.
So that we don't fill up our agendas with, okay, we're gonna hear 27 applications to change zoning tonight. Because we have a lot of work to do besides that.
Sure. Well, that's why we plan ahead, and we wanna stick to our plan, of course.
So
But
one
there's
of the.
also property rights, where if somebody owns property and they wanna petition the city you know, I'm not the one that decides whether or not you guys are the ones that.
But it's very rare that the property owner actually petitions the city. It's usually somebody who has a proposal to purchase, wants to propose what they want to do with it if they get it. And I guess that's not.
We don't allow that though.
Well, you do every day.
We do.
They have to sign an
Every day.
affidavit.
Yeah,
so
but
the
only
property
with
owner's
the
aware of it.
person's permission.
And
Yeah.
they have to pay for
Okay.
the application.
But I
so-
guess my point being.
Do you wanna raise the application fee?
Maybe.
So it's not just done as
So
a
that it's not
matter,
just done
let's
as
just
a,
see.
let's just see if we can get away with this one.
So the fees have to cover our costs, we can't just raise
Yeah.
fees to raise
Yeah.
fees.
And you
It's-
can't
it's
raise them
just
to
our costs.
discourage.
Yeah.
But, you know, there is a lot of work that goes into this sometimes, and it goes through quite a process, and I don't wanna.
But if it covers costs.
I think that sounds like a nice problem to have.
Look,
Um,
if you guys want to, make it so people don't petition, you could.
No, then we're back.
No.
We're back to the problem.
Here's the situation.
Well, we can't stop that, but my point is.
For example, we just revised the general plan. If we suddenly get, say, okay, open season, now tell us the 20 ways you want us to change it, and next month do it again, and do it again. I think there has to be some kind of limitation of, okay, this property has been applied for so many times within a given period. I don't wanna just keep hearing somebody say, okay, well, you won't let this guy build 5-story apartments, so will you let this guy, will you let this guy? And just, the answer's been no.
Yeah. In the ordinance for the same property.
The same property,
You have to
or-
wait, but if it's a different property, yeah, somebody's.
Oh, you have to wait how long?
I think 6 months for the same.
For the
thing. So
same property.
We've never even seen that before.
Part of this comes down to, this is the land use authority for the city, and people who have an application have a due process right to have their application heard, whether it's gonna be granted or not. So we can't say you can't do it, because that'd be a violation of due process, so.
No, but in the
we-
past, we instructed Brigham to kind of say, look, tell these people that it's an uphill battle.
And he does that.
He does,
Yeah,
you know,
I
I
don't
think
know
people have the right
every
to
day.
try and get their
That's why we only see how many
We
we
just
do.
get so many more than before.
Filtering for.
Jordan?
I like this idea. I think this is good. I think this is gonna help stimulate, hopefully it'll at least not discourage someone. I'm worried someone's looking at our plan and saying, oh, well crap, I just missed the open period. In 2
Exactly.
years, I'm gonna build over there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think, I would love to have tons and tons of applications to build on the same property.
I don't think
And
it's gonna
then I
change
get to
much.
pick which one I choose. And so,
But nobody can apply for the same property at the same time, so
Okay.
that's impossible.
So then, this sounds like it's not really a problem, so I think this is great.
Well, and if no other cities have this, and we're the only one that has,
Yeah.
and this makes us seem really difficult to work with.
Yeah.
And I don't like
We are,
that perception.
Just one tiny note, just, I noticed in the packet that the renumbering of them will need to be adjusted.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanna make sure.
Consent agenda?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I don't care.
Cassie, would you? Cassie,
Sure sounded like you cared.
Would you
Well,
add G to the
I'm
consent
concerned with
agenda?
the open season
Uh,
clause, I just.
H1
Well, let's see what happens.
and
If we have to
H3.
back off this, we still can.
Is the mixed use going the work session in March, or are we having a special work session in March?
How full is March?
Well.
I don't think we can evaluate that just yet.
Yeah.
We can look at
I would love to keep
TBD?
evaluating.
Let's look, we don't know altogether what the 11th, 10th looks like, so if we get short of things, we'll talk it.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to I. Paul or Brody, which one of you?
Yeah, I can start off, but I'm gonna have Paul brief you on, some statutory requirements. From time to time, we receive requests for either a waiver of fees, reduction of fees, sometimes even sponsorship of some things. So we thought about having a policy,
I love this.
that kind of sets it all up front so that we can just administratively say yes or no, or here's the deal.
If you
That's a
qualify
great
here,
idea.
here,
But
here, I love
I wanna
it.
give
Yeah, so when it comes to, there are some state codes that govern this. If you're looking at a person that's saying, we want the city to contribute to a cause or to an event or an organization, like monetarily, there's a certain study you need to do, and then you have to have a public hearing. If they're asking for a fee waiver, you don't have to do the same 1082 study, but you still need to have a public hearing. and because it's city resources that are being used. And there's a limit that they put in state code that you can't, allow waivers and non-monetary assistance to exceed 1% of your annual budget. Now, we don't come near that with the request that we have, that'd be a lot of money actually. So I don't think we're ever gonna have the 1% problem. But you would need to have, a hearing to decide whether this is if it's a nonprofit entity, and if it's an individual who's not a nonprofit, then it doesn't apply. So it needs to be a nonprofit entity that requests the fee waiver. The question for you at that point would be, is this something that we wanna support? Is this something that, contributes to our community, or is it not? So that'd be the question that you would look at when that comes up. So when you're crafting a policy like this, just, what we're trying to do is hopefully build in, if you're comfortable with certain organizations or certain circumstances, we say, yeah, I think we're always gonna say yes here, then let's put it in the policy. If that's not there, then we wouldn't have the policy, and then you'd have every fee waiver request would come here for a public hearing.
So we can review this a couple ways. If you've read it, the proposed policy outline already, we can just discuss the points that you have questions and concerns about, or I can just walk through it either way.
Like it. Read it. It's good.
I have some concerns. So obviously, city attached organizations, we have a general policy of always letting them be, they have no fees to use our facilities. But I do think that we lack some limitation of what that is, because there are times when I think that if the city is losing potential revenue because we're allowing for some of these city attached groups to run them out, then are we really getting the best use of our facilities? So
you're saying if it's like, we could have a comp team play ball versus our city league, we're gonna take the comp team because they'll pay us money?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm kind of saying that if there's a comp team, or if there was a city team that said, okay, we want to use this 365 days out of the year, that's unreasonable. But we have, I mean, some sports, just thank goodness to their own regulation, only allow so many nights a week. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to accommodate what we have. So I guess I'm thinking more on the rental space of like the community center, and not so much as like our comp teams or anything. But it has to be within limitation. They can't say, I'm now going to take for the next 6 months all of your space. I've had some that bordered that.
What's an example?
Yeah, name, because you gotta explain what you're talking about. I don't know where you're
Yeah,
going.
so if we've got like classrooms in the community center, we've got something under the city umbrella, say Arts Council that does plays, let's say they gotta rehearse for a play for a few months or whatever, and they wanna do that regularly throughout the night. Yeah, there's an issue there where it's under the city umbrella, we're tying up a rentable space with our own facility, which there's nothing wrong with that actually. It depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to maximize revenue, then it's probably not a good idea.
So
But if your goal is to
engagement.
To be fair to this, they've been self-regulating, and so they say we only have a season, but for like 3 months, they do take up all of our space for a block of 3 months. But if that same group or so on similar came in and said, now I want it 9 months out of the year, there would be a lot of groups that no longer could use our facilities because of something like that. So I guess I'm trying to say it's good that they self-regulate, but I'm thinking about what if we had somebody else that came in and said, because we have had proposal of, okay, well, what if I teach a class, and what stopped this from being every day, every evening, was you had to pay something back to the community center. There were people that were like, no, if I form this as a nonprofit, then, but they're nonprofits that pay themselves a great deal of money and still just keep it as a nonprofit.
I mean, could we then offer something like,
No,
waivers
there's
offered at
ways
3
to do
months
it.
at a time, or?
Yeah, maybe just have it be
You
maybe a limited
We've experienced
time that they
order it
can
for 3
have
months
it,
at
yeah.
a time, or?
And then it.
So I guess I'm
look
just
at
saying
it
there has to be some kind of limitation, not because it's a problem today, but I see it as a possibility because it's been requested before.
So if we're saying like in the policy, a 501c3 nonprofit in the proposed policy, 501c nonprofit gets a 50% fee reduction. What if somebody comes and says, I wanna rent community center classroom every day for the next 9 months?
Okay, so Seth
Is
just
that
had
a
an idea
problem?
that what if we say, we do it in 3-month increments?
If they pay for
Quarterly
it,
increments.
You mean
Where we
you
look
can't
at it
reserve
again, we
permit
can
it out
reserve
for-
it up to
So you have to
3 months.
renegotiate.
And then we have to decide if that's something we want to do again, or if it's caused an issue.
Well, I mean,
Wasn't the goal of this to take this into a more of an administrative role rather than
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Well, I want, for example, I'd love Crest to be able to say, those guys are terrible.
Exactly, kinda like a contract where you say, okay, we have to
Say they never clean up after themselves, they never do anything, at that point they get disqualified.
They have to reapply.
Yeah.
So maybe not reapply, but it's up to a quarterly
Kind
review
of a review,
by
yeah, a
the
review.
person in charge of the
center.
The
Yeah.
center.
Right, well, but they're applying through them, not necessarily coming to us.
So if it goes through them, then the administration in Parks and Rec gets to decide.
so I think that the policy ought to be somewhere around the idea that I think that you should be able to schedule a year in advance, but only for up to 3 months at a time. You know, you can't say, I'm not going to schedule for a 9-month period. You would have to come back and reschedule.
I think we can entertain that. I would like Presta's input.
Okay.
Before we finalize this.
She would know.
And I know also, I've been in a group that we had to call the library every month to say, is this date open? And we, you had a 30-day window that
Right.
you'd say, can we book it to this day? And we just knew that it was our responsibility to
regulations.
call and say, can we get it? And they put it on our books. We weren't allowed to do 3 months ahead or a year ahead. We could only do it 30 days ahead for each month.
Do we still
I don't wanna
require a
do that.
deposit for all of this?
Pardon?
We don't.
At upfront deposit?
We can.
I think that's okay.
I think
to
you should.
require.
You can
But
charge.
if you're scheduling it out.
We
Yeah, that's
can, we can
reflection.
charge and for example, like when you rent council chambers, we charge $600. You get half of it back if you cleaned up. So.
I think there should be a deposit in place for any type of,
I think so too, because if I've ever had to book something, you do it online and you pay for it and again.
Especially if you have any kind of length in time ahead of time to
But
book it out.
think about not just facilities, but
Blocks a
like
spot.
parks, because we've had people that come in and said, I want to create my own personal camp for this sport, and I'm gonna charge money, and, do we really have the space for that, or is that take out one of our rec teams? And
see, most sports things are not nonprofits.
some of them are. That's the one that kills me, and it's not because they're not making money, it's because they've followed the steps of the nonprofit.
The library over here, for example, will not, if there's any kind of Montessori exchange, you can't book it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we, in this draft, we wrote that for, an individual, we could also require that of, if it's an organization. So for example, an individual providing assistance, instruction, or other services and not charging a fee and not selling or advertising a product or service, they can get a fee waiver on the
Right.
rental. And so you could say it has to be a 501c3 and isn't charging services. However, a lot of these things are fundraisers.
No, what about like?
That's like why they're doing
No,
it.
what
Yeah,
about
so it's not-
with
That's why
council
they're
though,
doing it,
because
though.
they do charge a fee to their kids,
Right.
so, but they are a 501c3.
But I'm going back to your example just for a minute. I don't know what it was. Tell me what you just said.
So some,
Charge a fundraiser.
yeah,
Fundraiser.
it might be a 501c3 organization, but the whole
Oh,
reason
got
they're
it. I
having the
remember now.
event is to raise money for a cause.
So are we saying we would not, let's say someone wants to teach I'm just gonna use the example we did last year, is the ham radio class. So let's say someone comes in and says, I would like to teach ham radio. What we did then is we just did it through the rec center. The rec center offered the class and he was the instructor.
is a city program.
And we do that a lot with not just ham radio, but it's a city-run program, and the city gets their cut, and Cresta sets up that contract.
Well, it was all
No issue
zero.
with all that.
It was a net zero. We
Right.
just gave him we just let him use the classroom.
Right.
But there are others that the rec center does get a piece of, and I think that's just fine.
Yeah, we do like aerobics and Zumba classes
They just started some art classes, and
Contracted.
it's just fine, cause it goes through the rec center, and they get a piece for it to put back into the facility.
Yeah.
Counsel for Brody, what do you want him to do?
I'd like to see this, be policy-based so that we don't have so many steps they have to go through and so much administration. And I would like it to, for us to set a time limit on any of the ones that want it for an extended period of time. I think we should have a quarterly review. And that it's Cresta or somebody in charge who gets to do the reviewing, not us, cause we're not privy to what's going on there.
I agree with what you said. I just think getting Cresta's feedback anyway ahead of time on that recommendation as a whole would be to see if it adds
Has
an
she
administrative
proposed,
burden
she
to
read
her.
through your proposed policy and she's, well, I want her to do that first.
Yeah, we've discussed it.
The rest
I don't
of
know that she's actually read this, but we've discussed,
If she
probably
loves it,
80% of this.
I'm a lot more amiable to it.
Maybe what I can do is, let's bring this back again, it's like first reading.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's bring this back again, I'll have Cresta look at this and, we'll put it
See how it
in a
applies.
policy document.
Right.
I like it.
Brody, let's talk about the survey.
Okay.
I read through them all too, they're very interesting.
Very interesting. You have one that said something and one that opposed it
I know.
directly right under
Okay.
it, constantly.
I thought you could see people were like responding as groups, you know.
Yeah,
Let's all get on and throw a survey right now about.
Sorry, I
Say
pulled it
this
up.
specifically.
That happened last time with the, what
Let's
was
get a
it?
poll.
The ice skating or the
Oh,
hockey,
okay.
is the hockey. They were supposed to build a hockey rink.
I'm gonna text one of my friends. Oh, dude.
Yeah, fill it out now.
Yes.
I will say that one of the most common things was a concern for parking and the design, which I will say that both Andrea and I brought up immediately, was that we were concerned about parking, but it was we were told there's more parking there per acre than anywhere else, so it's a hard one to judge. We purposely distributed the parking so that it wouldn't
So you
seem
didn't
like
have to
big
walk
areas.
clear across the
Right.
park.
That was a very
Exactly.
conscious thing that we
Yes.
think is good. The other thing is we very consciously did not make more than 4 rows anywhere.
Right.
So that little kids would not be running out.
through, right.
And there were other people, make more rows deep. I'm like, then you've missed the safety.
Exactly.
I mean, the whole
Yeah.
thing about protecting kids.
I think
It's just perception of it.
I think for a lot of people, it's hard to like know the scale
I
of
do,
that
yeah.
drawing, but,
When you're at
we'll talk a
15
little bit
acres.
about that. I'm gonna walk through a few things here, this is just sorta some of my
Yeah,
analysis
how
from the
did we get
survey.
60 people outside of the city? in
So
on this?
you can sign up as a member, but it knows
If you're
where you
cheating.
are
You just use
and
IP
your
address,
address,
or what does it do?
and so.
How do you know where you are?
Maybe,
We can-
did they do it at
Just put in your
work?
address.
So
Well,
the real point is if Jordan
Don't
puts
do
this,
that.
or fills this out at work, he's still a citizen.
You put your
Oh,
where
yeah.
you live on
That's
there.
true.
So you know who these people are.
I don't, but Flashbo does. They know it's in the
There's a
city,
level of
cause they
security
use it on
between
map.
Yeah, you can't look it up and find out.
You,
Say,
so you
shame
really
on you.
can't come back and figure out who this is?
They won't give it to you.
I don't have it. I don't have access to that. Only they do.
Okay. Well, that was my concern, is that it's not really anonymous if we
Yeah.
know
No.
where these people
Look at
are.
these
The on-
people in Clearfield.
The only way you know is if they use their real name as their member name or their screen name on there. So when you go in, when you log in, you can go to like the rankings or whatever they
Yeah.
have on it. And sometimes people use their actual name, but that's it. And you can't even see everybody, you only see like the top.
But you have no idea who Cute Girl 441 is.
Yeah.
The hot stuff.
I do.
Okay, so participation, let's start there. We had 763 people sign up, 568 participated, and 509 of those were residents. That is a 67% response rate from our total sign up. Now, SurveyMonkey, when they do surveys, they say that a 20 to 30% response rate is considered highly successful.
And this was only open for like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
wasn't it?
48 hours.
Sure.
Oh, wow.
That amazed me.
And the vast majority of the responses came within the first 12 hours.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah. Sample size. So, from a statistical perspective, we needed 380 residents because this was random, it wasn't targeted to any certain audience. 380 residents needed to have a 5% margin of error with a 95% confidence level. So meaning, if we were to repeat this survey, 95% of the time, we would get the same results, plus or minus 5%.
That's awesome. That's
So-
really good error.
So yeah, they actually, Flashvote gave us a plus or minus 4% in the responses. So-
Even better.
So whatever, you know, we got out of the survey, if you adjusted it up or down 4%, that's the margin of error. Now, we need to be sober about what exactly, who exactly we were surveying. So for example, on the left you have the age representation of the survey respondents, okay?
Isn't that pretty representative of our demographics though?
Well, if
No,
you look
look
at
at the demographics right there.
If you look at the right,
kids, yeah.
so
No,
what,
no, but like, I'm saying like the 20-somethings, they're non-existent in Syracuse.
so yeah, and I'll get to that, cause you're on the right track.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, on the right is our age distribution of the city, and it looks different because we have so many children in the city. But so what we need to be honest about is we did not survey children.
Right,
So
exactly.
So there's a good 35 to 40% of our city that we did not survey. There may have been 1 or 2 17-year-olds that signed up, or 16-year-olds, but it's not a lot. So when you look at, let's see, there we go. So when we actually look at who we surveyed, this is a representation of the adult age distribution of the city. It is closer, however,
Still missing the older.
what it shows is the 61 and over population is overrepresented in our survey. So they were 25% of the survey respondents, but they're only 15 to 18% of our adult population.
Maybe they just had the time.
And so they're overrepresented in the response. Everyone else is kinda about the same, except for our young adults. 20 to 30 range, you know, they were only 4% of the respondents of the survey, and they are about 15% of our adult population. So they're underrepresented. So we just need to keep that in mind. Okay, gender distribution was about 50-50. There's a difference of 4 respondents, so that was good. Okay, my analysis on question 1, essentially we were able to, just by having the survey, what question 1 did for us was it educated at least 343 people about the park. So 38% of the participants didn't know anything about the project before they took the survey. There's about 166 that were already knowledgeable. And so just by having that survey, we learned that, you know, that may not sound like a lot, it's only about 1% of the population of the city, but it's probably about 10% of the people that vote. You know, so it's actually, you got a lot of mileage there.
But more importantly, it could be 343 households. And so all you need is one person in a household to say, hey kids, guess what I read today?
It's likely not. Most spouses voted the same, or not, but participated because they heard from their spouse that they did.
So worst case, it's 150 people.
But either way though,
150
those people
households.
are now having conversations with their neighbors too. And especially if they're motivated enough to fill this out.
And that was one of the goals of the survey, is just to raise awareness of the project.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go to number 2. So number 2, why are adults and their families visit parks? The big story here is the 72%. Overwhelming number 1 is for picnics or social gatherings. Now that included So when people selected other, I counted all the times that things like playgrounds or sledding or splash pads, which are social family activities, we added those into family picnics and social gatherings. So it went from 65% to 72%.
I do have to throw out this caution though with that statistic,
Mhm.
because when I took the survey, I read this through and I thought, the parks that we have are overwhelmingly that type of park.
Mhm.
So if that didn't come out to be a very high number, that's not reflective of what we offer. What
Mhm.
we're talking about is something that we really don't offer.
Mhm.
So where's the fair representation of how many people would do that if it were
If they had
available?
the option.
Maybe in the next
So,
question.
so the question is why do you or your family visit parks?
Not
Not
Syracuse,
necessarily
but.
Not-
just
not
here.
But
Syracuse.
the parks in
Any
Syracuse
parks.
don't really have the other options, is my point.
Well, no, you still got 53% on adult youth and sports, I mean.
Yeah,
that's
so,
not to shake a stick
so
at.
number two, so we asked people to, you know, you list up to three, what
Right.
your top three are. Number two was individual exercise. And number three was youth sports and adult sports combined. Now, the reason I combined them is because they are the same playing surface.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in terms of what we have to build,
Programmable.
Yeah, it's the same
it's
thing.
the same surface, so
Right.
it's okay to combine them. Now, that was the order overall, but it wasn't the order in any one age group. So for example, ages 31 to 45, number one was family picnics, number two was sports,
Because that age group usually has kids.
and number three is individual exercise, yeah. So, there was a lot of, votes for the sports from that age group, so that's number two.
Sure.
All other age groups, number one was family, again, activities, number two, individual exercise, and number three was leisure time. So just that one age group, 31 through 45, because they wanted, you know, adult and youth sports, it rose that to the third highest overall. And then there was no significant difference in, gender, except more males, selected special events than females statistically, so.
We don't have any that cater to males, so it's kind of odd.
Huh?
I mean, there's no
Oh, it'd be
reason
like
for that to be
soccer
different.
or
Oh.
some kind of a.
For a
Okay,
special event.
question three, so what we got out of this is park features to be what's gonna be used the most. So number one, playgrounds. Number two is trails, actually they were basically tied
They're very popular.
statistically. And, number three was the pavilions.
Mhm.
Which is what we have.
So playgrounds, trails, and pavilions were the top three in all age groups, except for ages 46 to 60, where pickleball was number three. But only by 2%, so it wasn't statistically, it's about the same.
It's in the margin of error, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's still, those are the top three.
Okay. It's still up there for that demographic.
Females preferred playgrounds over males, and
not by a lot.
males preferred open space over females. But neither of those, excuse me, the open space wasn't in the top three, but playgrounds were. Then, last question, other comments, there was no overwhelming issue in just the open question of, do you have any comments? There were several things that got repeated, so I listed those. We mentioned parking, you know, we can take a look again at that. Dog park was mentioned, frequently. I think, you know, a lot of people still are looking at, you know, public pool or splash pad or some sort of water feature that they'd like to see even in this park. So we can take a look at that.
But do you think they're saying that in this park, or, because when I read the question, I felt like people would respond to that and say just in general, because if you take the swimming pool context, there's no way we're putting a swimming pool in the park, that's actually a facility.
Yeah, there was several comments about a swimming
pools,
pool.
right.
Yeah, and so we can look at it and decide
Well,
if
and on
that's.
the concept, it had that big space, and when we were showing people in the park,
I know, it was blue.
they all
They
said,
all
is
thought
that
it
a
was a
pool?
pool.
And so I think that might be.
That might have generated the thoughts about it.
Um,
Yes.
Trees were repeated, we know that that's popular, and same with shade.
It's gonna be
Bathrooms and water
in a
fountains.
younger
So,
com-
bathrooms, yes, water fountains, so, those are some other things. So, that was kind of an overall analysis. I think, you know, what do we do with this data is the question. And I think what you wanna do is use it in terms of the next step as far as how are we gonna get this thing built? If we have to section it off into phases,
Yep.
I think this data will help you
No.
put together a phasing plan based on what people want.
Okay.
That said, I wonder if I could make an assignment here, Seth and Jordan. Wondering if you could take this back to the Parks Advisory Board and have some discussion on phasing. You know, what they think about phasing and.
Aren't I on that?
Yes.
Isn't it
I'll go,
Jordan and,
but-
oh,
Is it you?
sorry, isn't
Yes.
it Jordan and?
It is.
That's why I was like, well, I think that's me.
I got
You're out,
some-
Lisa. You're out.
I'm in.
that
You're
okay
out,
if
Seth
I
is
go?
in.
Now, wait a minute, I've got to make this acceptable to Cassie.
Okay.
I want the female perspective. Remember that, and I forgot that. But would you take that back to the Parks Advisory Board and give us some suggestions on phasing? And,
So the best way to establish that, last time, just Doug emailed someone, and I don't know who, and got it all set up. Who would be the best person to reach out to establish that meeting? Who's got all the contact information for that?
So, yeah, Chris and I can help get it organized. I think they have to actually reorganize. That'll be one of the agenda items, is who's chair and.
Doug was serving as the secretary, so.
So Chris and I can.
Who will be contacting me to let me know if there's a meeting? Because I don't wanna miss it.
We're not sure yet, but
Okay.
we'll spur it on.
You'll let me know,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Brody.
Or so.
Seth will pass it on to me.
Council, I'm going to declare maybe a 10-minute recess, or just, cause I want us to be fresh for the open and public meetings training.
You want him to fall asleep?
I don't want him to fall asleep. Let's reconvene here at 20 after. Can we?
So 5 minutes?
Paul lecturing?
No, we have a public meeting.